The guild master calls out to Hinata Lariark, who stops and looks back totally unaware of what's coming. He gets right in Hinata's face, calling him useless trash who doesn't do anything besides mixing potions. Pointing a finger, the man tells Hinata straight up that they have no use for him anymore. It gets worse when he announces that as of today, Hinata is officially banished from the guild. Hinata is completely shocked, barely able to breathe as he asks why this is even happening. He can't believe it after putting in 3 years of hard work, but the boss doesn't seem to care. Apothecary Hinata Lariark stands there frozen, trying to process his life falling apart in a second. The guildmaster mentions it's been exactly 3 years since he took over the medical guild, and the guy in charge, Guildmaster Gayak Silva, seems to have a real ego problem while he explains that his dad gave him total control to do whatever he wants now that those 3 years are up. Gayak Silva stands there acting like he owns the place, telling Hinata that starting today, this guild is officially his property, and he points a finger right at the kid's face, using his new power to announce that Hinata is officially banished. Hinata realizes the new boss has always looked down on people who make potions, making things basically impossible since the guy cut his budget to nothing and forced him to work with the absolute worst ingredients available. Even with all that, Hinata managed to use his skills to make everything work, especially since he's the only potion maker left. He looks the master in the eye and tells him he can't just accept this sudden decision, but he keeps going, explaining that he worked hard for years without complaining and just wants to know the actual reason. Gayak just smirks at him, asking if he's really too slow to understand what's actually happening here. He tells Hinata that in a real medical guild, low-level guys who just mix potions are nothing more than bottom feeders who simply don't belong in his presence, leaving Hinata standing there completely crushed by the harsh words. Gayak gets real arrogant, bragging about how magical doctors are elites who went to university, and he says that compared to high-level guys like them, potion makers are basically just trash who don't even need a license to do their work. The other guild members join in, saying potion makers just slack off and they can mix their own stuff anyway. So one of them tells Hinata that commoners should really just stick to the low-level jobs, calling him useless while he stands there taking the insults. They tell him to find a job that actually suits him, and Hinata realizes this whole reason for firing him is just terrible since he knows that while magical doctors technically outrank potion makers, that's only because you have to be a noble to become a doctor in the first place. But judging him for his background without even looking at his actual results is something he just can't get behind. Gayak points a finger up, telling Hinata he looks pretty miserable, but then he mentions that's not the only reason he's getting the boot. The mood shifts instantly as Gayak claims a patient actually died from a potion Hinata mixed yesterday. The news leaves the kid completely frozen. Gayak puts a bottle on the table, calling it the literal proof of Hinata's mistake, which makes Hinata grab the bottle to check it out. He says there's no way, even a bad potion shouldn't be able to kill someone, and looking at the liquid, he gets a bad feeling. He starts to suspect that someone actually swapped out the contents of his bottle. Hinata speaks up, telling them straight out that this isn't his work, but Gayak just points a finger and tells him to stop lying. The master keeps shouting, reminding him he's the only potion maker there, so obviously anything in that bottle is his fault. Hinata tries to point out their logic doesn't make sense since they just said anyone could mix potions, but the doctors just scoff, asking why they'd ever waste their time doing his job. Gayak tells him he should be lucky they're just banishing him instead of putting him on trial, and Hinata finally realizes that talking back is just a waste of breath. He's disgusted that they'd make up a death just to fire him, but Gayak isn't done yet, acting like he just thought of one more thing. Gayak brings up that it's actually Hinata's sick sister's birthday today. The kid can only look on in shock as he confirms it. Gayak flashes a really nasty, sharp-toothed grin, then he leans in and tells Hinata that the timing for this is actually perfect. He keeps mocking him, saying now Hinata has a great story to tell his sister as a birthday gift, which leaves the kid looking completely terrified. Gayak yells that Hinata's salary was too trash to buy a real present anyway. The poor guy just stands there trembling while he desperately asks if there's any severance pay, but Gayak just scoffs, calling him cruel and telling him he gets nothing. Hinata tries one last time, asking for a recommendation for a new job, but Gayak just walks away, saying that's obviously not happening. The realization hits Hinata that these people never cared about him for a second, so he just looks down and tells them to forget it. He knows he still needs a ton of money to cure his sister's illness, so with his back against the wall, Hinata decides he'll just have to try his luck as an adventurer or something. But as soon as he says it out loud, the doctors ask if he's a total idiot. The whole group just starts laughing in his face like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. Gayak holds up a finger and tells Hinata to listen up for a second, because the other doctors want to join in too. The bowl-cut guy calls Hinata a total failure for only having 3 skills. The big guy laughs along, saying that even a 10-year-old kid can use 20 skills in a fight these days. Hinata tries to argue that he might be right, but he looks completely defeated as Gayak points out that none of those skills are even for combat. He tells him there's no way he'll ever be an adventurer. Hinata stands there alone, realizing that what they're saying is actually true. He thinks about his only abilities: medicine compounding, material activation, and material appraisal, while knowing that they're all just meant for a potion maker and nothing else. Gayak twists the knife, telling Hinata he has no talent and should just go die in a ditch with his sister. He just waves him off with a casual goodbye, leaving Hinata to walk out the door with nothing left. Hinata lets out a heavy sigh, looking like he's carrying the weight of the world. Everything just went south and now he's finally back at his front door. He announces he's home, but he's stuck wondering how he's even going to break the bad news to his sister since his cousin Asago is right there to welcome him back with a huge smile. She's an incredibly sweet and reliable girl who spends her time helping Hinata take care of his sick sister. She notices him standing there and asks if he's okay, because she can see how pale he looks. She asks if something is wrong, and Hinata just admits he feels a little off as the two of them sit down together at the kitchen table to catch up. Asago tries her best to stay positive, telling Hinata that everything is going to work out and promises she'll work even harder from now on to make sure things get better for them. Asago does what she can to help out. She earns a bit of money working from home while taking care of Hinata's sister, doing small things like fixing magic tools and prepping herbs. She looks at Hinata with a kind smile and tells him he's already worked hard enough, but Hinata just rubs his eyes and thanks her, feeling bad for everything she's doing for them. They're caught off guard when a quiet voice from the doorway calls out for brother, and standing there is Hinajiku Larier, a young girl with long hair who's clearly been sick. Hinata calls her name. This is his beloved little sister, and he's clearly worried because it's obvious she overheard their talk. He looks away, apologizing for being such a pathetic brother. Hinajiku doesn't believe that for a second, though. She tells him she knows he's actually amazing. She gives him a huge smile, saying other people just don't understand how great he really is. Hinata realizes that having these two by his side is the only thing keeping him going, and then Hinajiku looks up, thanking him for everything he does. He knows he's gotta keep pushing for them from here on out, but then he sees her head drop and realizes she's falling asleep right there. As he holds her, Hinata's heart sinks. He can feel how much weight she's lost lately, and it really starts to get to him. Asago tries to keep things light, jokingly telling Hinajiku that it's not fair she gets all the attention, but the little girl just giggles. She tells Asago she can have a turn sitting with her big brother later on. Hinata just looks at her with a gentle smile. Seeing her happy like this makes everything else feel like it's worth the struggle. He watches her sleep peacefully and makes a silent vow. He's going to find a way to cure her illness no matter what. He grips his hand into a tight fist, knowing that to save her, he's going to have to dive way deeper into potion research than ever before. He just hopes he can find a job that actually pays enough to cover the costs, and by the next day, he's out in the city. Standing in the middle of a busy market street, Hinata clears his head. It's time to stop worrying and actually start looking for some work. Hinata walks through the city thinking that if he's gonna stay a potion maker, a medicine shop is probably his best bet for a job. He really wants a place where he can keep up with his research on the side, because he's definitely done dealing with the medical guild, and just as he's planning his next move, something nearby catches his eye and makes him stop. He spots a girl standing in front of a shop stall looking pretty confused while she stares at the shelves, so Hinata walks over and asks her if everything is alright or if she's having some trouble. The girl turns around and introduces herself as Yumi, and she's got this total glow about her that completely catches him off guard. He's just standing there thinking about how beautiful she is. Yumi explains that she showed up to grab some crafting materials for herself, but the problem is she doesn't really know what she's looking at. Hinata offers to help out and pick the right stuff for her, which totally surprises her. She asks if he's actually cool with doing that while the shopkeeper stays busy in the back, just focused on reading his newspaper and ignoring everything else. The shopkeeper just sits there behind the counter, making a frustrated sound while he stays buried in his newspaper. Hinata takes a closer look at the shop's stock. His eyes widen as he starts picking up on something weird about the items. He and Yumi stand together over the displays, looking down at all the different crafting materials spread out in front of them. The shelves are filled with bundles of basic wood, and every single stack has a price tag that looks way too high for what it is. Even the small potted plants are marked up, sitting there in their little boxes with those same crazy prices attached. Moving down the line, even the fruit in the baskets is the same way. Everything in this place is being sold for way more than it's worth. Hinata is actually floored by the prices, thinking to himself that this stuff is way too expensive and the whole place is a total scam. He glances back at the man behind the counter, thinking that the shopkeeper is definitely a sneaky old guy for charging these prices. It makes total sense to him now why someone like Yumi would struggle here, because an amateur wouldn't even know they're getting ripped off. He adjusts his gear and gets ready to help her out. He's not about to let her waste her money on this junk. Hinata focuses and activates his special vision, a glowing magic circle appearing right over his eye as he calls out his material appraisal skill, ready to see what these shop items are really worth. The first plant he checks turns out to be a total waste, just a bottom-tier F-rank herb that he immediately passes on. But then he spots a B-rank medicinal herb mixed in for cheap, and he realizes this one is actually a great find. Yumi looks over at what he's picked out, saying she agrees that the herb looks like a good choice, but she's mostly just losing it over his skill, asking if he can really do material appraisal, and telling him how amazing that is. She keeps hyping him up, saying that having a skill like that is a huge talent, while Hinata just scratches his head and tries to act humble. He laughs it off a bit, mentioning that he still managed to get fired despite having the skill, which leaves Yumi sounding pretty confused. She looks him right in the eye and makes a sudden move, asking Hinata why he doesn't just come work for her group since he's looking. The offer catches him completely off guard, and he just stands there looking shocked, not sure what to say. Yumi starts to explain the situation, telling Hinata she was actually put in charge of a brand new merchant guild, and she admits they're pretty short-staffed at the moment. Hinata looks at her totally unsure if he's the right person because he asks if she's really sure about the offer, reminding her that he's just a regular potion maker. Yumi doesn't hesitate, telling him it's a done deal as long as he's willing to take the job. Hinata thinks about the idea of a merchant guild, feeling like he should jump at the chance, but he still has some doubts, so he tells her that while he definitely needs the work, there is something else he has to worry about. He explains that he needs to keep researching potions to cure his sister's illness, and honestly he's just not sure if he's cut out for a big position like that. Yumi's face lights up, and she tells him that's exactly why the job is perfect for him. She points out that the guild gets all kinds of rare materials, which would be great for his research, and Hinata finally starts to see why this could actually work. The deal is officially sealed as Lyra bows and tells Hinata she'd love to have him on board, and Hinata bows back, saying he's really looking forward to working with her. As they head out, it turns out that Lyra's full name is actually Lyra Leonhardt, and she's the one running the whole merchant guild. Hinata realizes he's going to be working at a place called World Tree, and as they walk through the busy market, the whole thing finally starts to feel real. He still can't help but feel a little bit shocked by the way things turned out so fast, especially considering how young Lyra is. He tells her it's honestly amazing that she's already a guild master at her age. While they keep moving, Hinata thinks to himself about how lucky he got finding a new job this quickly. Lyra mentions she still has a lot to learn while struggling with a heavy box, and even though she's struggling, Hinata just feels like he can't thank her enough for the chance. Hinata looks over at the stuff she's carrying and notices something seems a little off, so he stops for a second and asks Lyra what that is exactly. Lyra looks down at the materials in her arms, sounding a bit unsure of herself as she tries to answer. They both stare at the basket she's holding, and it's filled with these creepy, dark plants that look like they're giving off a total bad omen. Hinata looks at the plants and realizes right away he doesn't even need his appraisal skill to see that everything in the basket is basically F-rank trash. It's all just junk, and Lyra starts tearing up, saying she got tricked into buying them and has no clue what to do now. Hinata really wants to help her out, so he speaks up and asks if he can borrow the materials for a second. Lyra is pretty confused and wonders why he'd want that stuff, but before she can say much, Hinata starts using his material boost skill to activate the plants right there in front of her. The plant starts off as a low-level F-rank medicinal herb, but as the magic kicks in, it starts glowing and actually transforms into a much better D-rank version of the herb. Hinata wipes some sweat off his face and asks if that makes the herbs a bit more usable, while Lyra just stands there in total shock. She suddenly grabs his hands and tells him he's honestly amazing, leaving Hinata standing there completely surprised by her reaction. Lyra stares at the upgraded materials in total disbelief. She says she's never seen a skill like this before, and Hinata just scratches his head, acting all casual about it. He mentions that he does think it's a pretty handy skill to have, but he keeps it real and explains that for what it's worth, this is actually his unique skill. He laughs it off a bit, telling her that honestly this is probably the only good thing about him. Lyra completely loses it and asks what he means by only, because from where she's standing this is way more than enough, and she can't believe he can just take literal garbage and breathe new life into it. She tells him straight up that he's amazing. Hinata feels a bit shy since he's never really been praised like that before, so he just tells her he's happy he could help. As they walk, Hinata thinks about how Lyra was cool enough to hire him, so he's determined to do whatever he can for her. But then someone suddenly yells out from behind them, telling them to wait. They both spin around as some guy barks at Hinata to halt, calling him out as the potion maker right there in the street. The girl standing in their way looks completely annoyed to see Hinata, standing there with her hands on her hips like she's looking for a fight. Hinata recognizes her immediately. She's Rena, one of the guild master's favorites who helped get him fired. Hinata tries to remember her name while Lyra asks who she is, so he explains that she's someone he used to work with back at the medical guild. He doesn't want any trouble and asks what she wants, reminding her that since they kicked him out, they really shouldn't be talking. Rena doesn't care about the small talk and demands he hand over the warehouse key, which catches Hinata off guard because he has no idea why she'd ask for that. She starts raising her voice and accuses him of stealing it, claiming he left the guild without returning the key when he was fired. Hinata just looks at her with a blank stare, honestly wondering what kind of nonsense she's trying to pull now. Before he can even argue, she grabs his arm and tells him to move, saying there's a patient nearby who's about to die. She starts dragging him through the street, muttering that if they have to waste time going all the way back to the guild warehouse, they're never going to make it in time to save the person, leaving Lyra standing there watching as Hinata gets hauled away. Hinata starts doubting himself, saying he probably won't be much help even if he shows up, but he still feels like he has to say something. He reminds Rena that she was the one who said they didn't need his help anymore. He keeps pressing her, mentioning that they should be able to just mix those potions on their own, but Rena isn't having it. She just tells him to shut up and get a move on since time is running out. Hinata finally gives in and says he gets it. If someone's life is actually on the line, he can't just walk away. He follows her while admitting he never wanted to see that guild master dude ever again, yet here he is, telling himself that the patients shouldn't have to suffer just because the guild staff are jerks. He realizes he's got the new materials he bought with Lyra on him, then turns to ask her if she's really okay with tagging along for this. Lyra doesn't even hesitate and says she's coming too, so Hinata just scratches his head and tells her he's sorry for dragging her into all this guild drama. Lyra tells Hinata it's no big deal because she already considers him a precious companion, and as they walk, she gives him a huge smile and says she'll go out with him. But the way she says it makes Hinata completely lose his cool. He starts blushing like crazy and repeats the words "go out" back to her. Lyra suddenly realizes how that sounded and turns bright red, covering her mouth in total shock. She starts waving her hands around and panicking, explaining that she didn't mean they were dating. Hinata just laughs it off nervously. The air gets pretty awkward as Lyra looks away, trying to get her thoughts together while her face stays flushed. But then she looks up shyly and says that even if things actually did lead to that, she wouldn't really mind it at all. She lets the suggestion hang in the air, leaving Hinata standing there looking stunned, scratching his head because he can't believe what he just heard. He wonders if his ears are playing tricks on him, then quickly points ahead and says they should just get going. Hinata tries to convince himself that there's no way a woman he just met would actually say something like that, and he decides that Lyra was probably just trying to be nice to him because she must have sensed that he has some really bad memories from his previous workplace, and that's why she offered to come along with him. He thinks she's just a truly considerate and kind person, nothing more than that. He starts to think his own hidden desires are making him hear things that aren't real, convinced that something is definitely wrong with his head. The two of them keep walking until they finally reach the medical guild. They stand in front of the massive building, ready to face whatever's inside. Inside, a guy named Gayak Silva sits there looking pretty full of himself as he introduces himself. Gayak Silva starts bragging about how he's the boss of a medical guild where only the best of the best get to work. He goes on about how great it felt to fire that useless potion maker yesterday, but then a guild member interrupts him. A guy named Kira shows up looking completely lost and admits he has no clue where the anesthesia potions are kept. Gayak points toward the shelves and starts losing it, calling the guy a total piece of trash for not knowing that. He complains to himself about how he finally got rid of one fool, yet everyone else around him is still just as useless. Kira is left to wander around the storage area looking stressed. He finds a shelf but realizes he's in trouble because he can't even tell an anesthetic apart from an antidote. Gayak starts screaming again, telling the guy that he should have learned basic stuff like that back in university. He's so fed up that he straight up asks the guy if he's looking to get fired too. Kira just tries to explain that since he's a magical doctor, he doesn't actually know the first thing about potions. Gayak is losing his mind, yelling at everyone to find out if anyone there can even tell their potions apart. The staff just stands there looking useless, admitting that none of them actually know which is which, so one of the guys asks what the guild master is going to do about the situation. Gayak snaps at them, asking how he's supposed to know that kind of stuff, but then he sighs and says he'll just have to handle it himself. He decides to point at one of his staff members and order him to just drink the mystery potion as a test. He explains that if the guy passes out, it's an anesthetic, but if nothing happens, then it's an antidote, which ends up working since the guy drops fast. Gayak just looks down at him and tells the unconscious man to at least make himself useful now that the potion is identified. He walks away grumbling about how it's going to be a long, busy day since he's stuck working with a bunch of idiots. Just as he's complaining, another staff member rushes in shouting that there's a huge emergency they need to deal with. Gayak thinks this is finally his moment to shine and show everyone how skilled he really is, but he stops dead in his tracks the second he looks inside the ward. The whole place is a total disaster zone, with injured people and patients lying all over the floor while everyone else panics. The staff leads Gayak into the medical ward where people are lying everywhere. Someone shouts that the disaster is right there, while others try to keep things moving. Gayak stares at the carnage in total shock, realizing this wasn't just some accident, it looks like a terrorist bombing just went off. He snaps out of it and starts barking orders at the staff, telling them to bring every potion they've got, since they're in a race against time and need to move now. It looks like they're about to deal with a ton of really difficult surgeries, but Gayak just steps up and starts casting his healing spells anyway. Despite all the chaos and blood, he's feeling pretty full of himself, thinking that with his medical magic, handling this mess is going to be a piece of cake. After hours of intense work, Gayak finally stops and wipes the sweat off his face, looking pretty drained from using all that power. He tells the team they somehow made it through the worst of it, while his staff members start sucking up to him, saying that's the guild master they know. Just as things are finally starting to quiet down, another worker comes running in screaming that they've got a massive emergency. The guy yells that Viscount Zirconia has been stabbed and they're bringing him in right this second, which leaves Gayak looking totally freaked out. He has no idea who the guy is and just screams out, asking who this Viscount person is supposed to be. Gayak processes the news, thinking how a terrorist bombing is a huge deal on its own, but it's even crazier that a Viscount actually got stabbed during the chaos. He realizes this mess might actually spark a war, and it's happening right after they kicked out that useless kid Hinata and tried to get things moving. A dark, greedy look flashes across Gayak's face as he starts coming up with a plan to use this disaster to his advantage, since he only cares about his own status. He thinks that if he can save the Viscount himself, he'll be a hero, so he tells the staff to just leave everything to him. The guy is basically drooling over the thought of having a powerful noble in his debt, so he announces to the room that he'll definitely save the man's life. Gayak starts barking orders at his team to get a massive amount of potions ready, but one of the workers looks totally panicked and tries to stop him. The worker points at the empty bottles on the floor and admits that the potion they just used was the very last one, which leaves Gayak completely stunned. The situation is getting worse because healing magic by itself isn't enough for something this bad, and they're quickly realizing that without those potions to help, the Viscount's wounds aren't going to close up properly, no matter how much magic they throw at him. Gayak tries to act like he's still in control, saying it's true they used a lot of supplies today and it couldn't be helped, but he's clearly starting to sweat. Gayak points toward the door and yells at a worker to get to the storehouse for more supplies, and the guy runs off trying to keep it together. Gayak says they'll just use medical magic until the potions show up. He focuses on the wound and says they just need to buy time by stopping the bleeding, but then a worker runs in screaming about an emergency. Gayak snaps back asking what now, and the worker looks totally pale while saying the storeroom won't open. It hits them that Hinata probably forgot to return the key before he left, and it's starting to look like Hinata is still causing problems for the guild even after being kicked out. Gayak completely loses his temper and screams for them to find that potion maker and bring him back immediately. He keeps barking orders to get the potions ready while the staff scrambles to follow his lead, but the Viscount's man has finally seen enough and yells out, asking what the hell is actually wrong with this guild. The guy doesn't stop there and keeps screaming at everyone to quit messing around and save the Viscount's life right now. Kira is sweating bullets while trying to use his magic, apologizing and begging for just a little more time, but the guys from the Viscount's side are totally fed up and keep yelling at him while Hinata and Lyra finally show up. Hinata gets straight to business and asks where the patient is, and Rena points him toward the back, where he sees the absolute mess Kira is making of the treatment, and it looks pretty bad. He can tell the magic Kira is using isn't necessarily wrong, but it's definitely not going to be enough to fix this. Kira looks over and acts like a jerk, telling Hinata he's late and complaining that they can't close the wounds without potion. The guy doesn't stop there and keeps insulting Hinata, saying that losers like him are always slow, and then he just tells Hinata to drop the delivery and get out of there. Lyra is completely losing it and asks what that guy's problem is, but Hinata just tells her it's okay. She can't believe he's being so calm, especially when he smiles and thanks her for getting mad for him. Hinata holds onto the heavy delivery bag with both hands, ready to pull out the D-rank herbs and C-rank slime core needed for the fix. He jumps into action, using his compounding skill as a magic circle lights up the room, instantly creating a C-rank healing potion. His hands move like a total blur, pumping out a whole batch of potions so fast that Lyra can't help but say how amazing he is. Hinata tells her that in medicine, being fast is the only thing that matters. But over at the bed, the other doctors are still panicking as they tell the guild master the wound just won't close. Kira starts losing it, screaming and wondering why his magic is failing. Hinata notices the wound isn't closing fast enough since they were late, so he reaches into his bag, saying they need to do something else. Lyra watches him grab something new and asks what he's got there. He explains it's his personal stash he was saving for his sister's illness. Lyra's shocked to see a C-rank root of the Tree of Life and some B-rank sunlight or powder, knowing how rare those items are. She asks if he's really okay using them, but he says it's fine because seeing someone about to die right in front of him is something he can't just ignore, and he refuses to let them die. Lyra just stands there looking at him, totally moved by what he said. Hinata centers himself as a bright light starts to gather around his hands. He's got this super intense look in his eyes, totally locked into the task at hand. He activates his medical magic, and a massive glowing circle appears as he yells out for a synthesis. Everything flashes bright as the magic peaks, showing just how much power he's putting into this. Out of the light comes a high-grade B-rank recovery potion, and it looks incredible. Hinata hands it over quickly, telling them they need to use it right now. The doctor is floored, barely able to believe his eyes, but Kira grabs it and gets to work, pouring the medicine over the Viscount's injury. Everyone's relieved because the wound closes up instantly. Hinata lets out a huge sigh and says it's a total relief things worked out. Renas smiles, reminding him that it's only thanks to his potion. Hinata just rubs the back of his head, feeling glad they managed to pull it off. In the background, everyone is just saying how thankful they are, right when a doctor yells that the patient is finally awake and sitting up. The Viscount looks pretty out of it as someone asks how he's feeling, but Gayak doesn't waste a second. He jumps right in, introducing himself as the big boss of the guild. He gives this fake-ass sparkly smile and says he's looking forward to staying in touch. The Viscount actually buys it and thanks him for the life-saving help. Gayak bows real deep, acting all humble while saying he's honored by the praise. Lyra sees right through it and asks Hinata if he's really okay with this guy hogging all the credit for his hard work. Hinata just rubs the back of his head and laughs it off, saying that potion makers are supposed to work behind the scenes. Lyra looks at him like he's being way too modest, especially since the Viscount is listening in and looks like he just noticed something pretty important. He points toward the table and asks what the deal is with that empty bottle sitting right there. Before Hinata can even say a word, Gayak jumps in and calls it a bottle from a potion made by a total loser. He explains to the Viscount that the guy was just their former potion maker, making it sound like he was nothing special. The Viscount just nods along as Gayak keeps talking trash, saying the guy was only good for mixing stuff and didn't have any other skills. But then the Viscount's tone completely changes. He asks if Gayak is seriously saying that he was saved by someone he considers trash. Gayak just stands there looking like a complete idiot. The Viscount tells him that for a guildmaster, he clearly doesn't know what's going on, making Gayak start to sweat. The Viscount leans in closer and says he actually knows everything about how this guild operates, and then he holds up the bottle, telling everyone it held a high-grade healing potion. Gayak is just standing there with his mouth open, totally losing it. Gayak is completely losing it, shouting about how there's no way a high-grade healing potion could ever be in a place like this. Viscount Zirconia sits up and asks for the full story on what happened, while Lyra steps up to tell him the truth. The Viscount glares at Gayak, asking if it's true that the guild master's screw-up almost got him killed. Lyra confirms everything, explaining that Gayak totally ran out of supplies and nearly let the Viscount die right there. She makes it clear that without that high-grade potion, he definitely wouldn't have survived the injury. Gayak starts panicking, yelling at everyone about his status as a Viscount and asking what they think they know. The Viscount shuts him down instantly, saying he's obviously educated enough to see what's happening, and then he starts to realize Gayak might be trying to play them. He gets a scary look and asks if the guy is seriously mocking the nobility. Gayak is sweating bullets now. He's got no way out of this and can't even find the words to defend himself, so the Viscount just moves on. He says he wants to thank the person who actually made the potion and orders them to call the maker in. The Viscount tells Gayak he's useless now and needs to back off, leaving the guild master just standing there groaning in total defeat. Just then, the real hero shows up. It's Hinata, and he introduces himself as the actual maker of the high-grade potion. Hinata drops to one knee and says it's an honor to be called in, which catches the Viscount off guard as he realizes who the kid is. The Viscount looks him right in the eye, telling Hinata straight up that he's the reason he's still alive right now. He's honestly blown away that Hinata was able to pull a high-grade recovery potion together on such a crazy short notice. Hinata stays humble though, just saying he happened to have the stuff on him when everything went down. Hearing that he used his own personal stash makes the Viscount even more certain that Hinata deserves a huge reward for what he did. The Viscount offers to recommend him for the guild master spot, but Hinata doesn't hesitate for a second to turn it down, so he explains to the shocked noble that he doesn't actually work for the medical guild anymore. Instead, Hinata gestures over to Lyra, introducing her to the Viscount as the head of the World Tree Merchant Guild where he's at now. Hinata introduces Lyra to the noble, and she confidently says she'll be working at this new guild from now on, which the Viscount acknowledges, rubbing his chin while saying he'll definitely keep the World Tree Guild in mind. He goes on to tell them that he'll be sure to use their services whenever something comes up, making Hinata lose it with excitement as he thanks the man, and once that whole situation finally wraps up, the group walks away with a massive bag of reward money for all the help they provided. But the cash isn't even the best part. They also got a signed guarantee to use the Viscount's name as a reference. Lyra is still buzzing from the meeting, shouting about how Hinata is totally amazing for saving the noble, and she can't believe he went out of his way to promote her guild without asking for a single thing in return. Hinata just scratches his head, telling her he only mentioned the name because he wanted to pay her back, and he gives her a huge smile, saying he didn't save the guy just to get a reward anyway. Lyra looks over at Hinata with this really soft, genuine smile on her face. She tells him she feels the exact same way he does, and that she didn't just invite him to the guild as a reward. With a huge, blushing grin, she admits the real reason she asked him is because she just genuinely wants to work with him. Hinata just stares back at her, totally stunned, and quietly says her name. The two of them stand there together in a great mood, just feeling really happy about how things turned out. But back at the medical guild, a fist slams hard into the wall as someone yells out in frustration, "It's Gayak." And he's absolutely losing it, wondering why a regular potion maker is getting all the credit. He keeps ranting to himself, saying the whole mess was Hinata's fault for not giving back the warehouse key, and what makes it even worse for him is the fact that Hinata actually showed up with a girl. He's completely fuming at this point, just thinking about how annoying the whole thing is. Gayak points a finger right at Hinata and starts yelling at him not to get a big head, which just leaves Hinata standing there looking completely confused. Gayak keeps going, blaming the kid for the fact that the Viscount almost died to begin with. He can't believe Hinata would actually try to take credit for the whole thing, and Lyra can only watch from the side looking really worried about where this is heading. The guy just keeps insulting Hinata, calling him absolutely unbelievable. Gayak barks out an order, telling him if he understands, he needs to hand over the reward money and the warehouse key and just get out. But Hinata doesn't even flinch, calmly telling his former boss that he just can't do that. He explains that sure, he could technically leave the money behind, but there's a pretty big reason why he's not handing over those keys. Hinata reveals that the warehouse wasn't even locked in the first place, and Gayak just stands there looking like he's seen a ghost. Gayak stutters that it's impossible, but Hinata just lets out a tired sigh, ready to be done with the whole situation. Hinata tells the group that everything will make sense once they actually get to the warehouse, so they all head over and stand right in front of the building to see for themselves. Gayak stands back with his arms crossed and tells one of his guys to try opening it, but the guy just groans, trying his best to pull the door, only to tell Gayak it's no use and the thing just won't budge. Gayak immediately starts pointing fingers, yelling that he knew Hinata was lying, while Hinata just sighs and puts a hand to his head. Then he just reaches out, grabs the handle himself and gives it a solid pull. The door swings wide open like it's nothing, leaving everyone else just standing there. Gayak loses it and screams that it's impossible, while his guild member can't believe what he's seeing, but Hinata just looks back and explains the door is only a little stiff, so it's easy once you know the trick. He's honestly shocked, asking if they really haven't managed to get inside this whole time, which is just unbelievable. Gayak is already fuming, crossing his arms and snapping at Hinata for acting way too cocky lately. But Hinata doesn't even blink, just calmly reminding the guy that he's not even part of this guild anymore. He honestly looks bored, telling Gayak he should be charging a nuisance fee just for being dragged out here, which makes Gayak lose it. He yells at Hinata to shut up, blaming him for not setting out today's potion. Hinata just hits back with the truth, asking who exactly fired him before he could even get to that. Then he really leans into it, calling out Gayak's trash habit of just dumping every single job onto other people. He gets serious for a second, telling them that being so lazy almost got someone killed, leaving the whole guild silent. Hinata tells them to just get their act together from now on, then he and Lyra head out, leaving Gayak so angry that he just slams his fist into the wall as hard as he can. He's standing there fuming, hating the fact that he's the one who fired Hinata but still ended up looking like a total joke. Hinata adjusts his glasses, feeling relieved that he finally doesn't have to look at Gayak's face ever again, but something is still weighing on his mind, making him stop and think for a second. He remembers the shape of the Viscount's wound, knowing for a fact it was done by an enemy hit squad, and while he says he hopes it doesn't turn into a full-scale war, he can't help but wonder. A sharp smirk creeps onto his face because even if things do get that bad, he knows his own earnings are going to skyrocket, though neither he nor Gayak truly get the scale of it yet. He's focused on the money going up, but the truth is this whole situation has split their two paths, where one of them is now moving toward becoming a total hero, while the other one is headed straight down a path of complete ruin. Hinata just stands there with a wild grin as the gears of fate finally start to move. The gears of fate are finally moving for both of them, and as Hinata stands there, the sound of the busy city hums in the background, leading right up to the massive headquarters of the World Tree Guild where a huge crowd is waiting. The whole room erupts, welcoming Hinata to Yggdrasil as he just stands there, completely stunned while Lyra brags to everyone about what a pro he is at making potions. She tells them he's the one who saved the Viscount and got the guild a major connection, so the rest of the crew starts losing it, calling him an incredible rookie and saying how reliable he looks. Hinata gets a little emotional since he's never actually been treated with this much respect before, but Lyra snaps him out of it, saying she's going to show him around the building. As they walk, Hinata mentions how nice the place is, and Lyra reminds him it's all brand new. Lyra leads Hinata into a massive room and tells him this is their product warehouse, and Hinata is totally blown away, saying he's never seen so many different materials in his life. Lyra just smiles and says having a huge stock is basically their specialty as a merchant guild. Looking at everything, Hinata thinks about how if he could use all these materials for research, there might actually be a chance he can finally cure his sister's illness, but Lyra cuts into his thoughts, saying she wants him to handle the purchasing for the guild. She tells him to take a good look around, and he nervously agrees, promising himself he'll do his best. As they walk through the aisles, Hinata suddenly stops when he notices something pointing at a big crate overflowing with random bags and asking what all that stuff is. Lyra doesn't think much of it and just tells him that's their scrap pile. Lyra explains that the pile is basically just garbage filled with materials that aren't worth anything, so Hinata points at the junk and asks if she minds him using his Matinai skill to fix them up, but Lyra is just confused. Seeing her freak out, Hinata asks if she's saying no, while she starts waving her hands around in a panic. Lyra says she doesn't mind him trying, but she's pretty sure they're just useless junk that won't help at all, but Hinata just smiles and says he's going to give it a shot anyway, starting things off by activating his material appraisal skill, causing a bright flash of light to hit the pile of scraps. Looking through the interface, he sees that every single item in there is in G-rank condition, which is a total disaster of a rank, even worse than the F-rank stuff most people see, making the items so trashed that not even a shady merchant would try to sell them to someone. Lyra starts to think it's a lost cause, but Hinata shuts that down immediately and tells her she's wrong. Hinata kicks things off by using his material boost skill. A magic circle pops up as he starts the activation process on a medicinal herb that's so far gone it's ranked as a total G-tier scrap. The herb suddenly starts glowing and stands back up. It's officially jumped up to an E rank. Lyra is completely losing it, yelling about how amazing it is that these dead materials actually came back to life. Hinata plays it cool and mentions they're only at the bare minimum usable level because they started as trash, but he's still pretty hyped. He realizes even a little profit is better than just throwing this stuff away. While Lyra is still processing everything, Hinata spots another box and asks if he can use those materials too. He takes that E-rank herb he just fixed up from the junk pile and pairs it with a D-rank slime core he found, getting ready to see what else he can make with his skills. He calls out his potion creation skill to start compounding, and the materials begin to swirl together inside a new magic circle. The process finishes and a glowing bottle appears. Lyra is hyped because that junk herb actually turned into a D-rank recovery potion. Hinata breaks down how it works, explaining that the final product's rank usually matches whatever the rarest material was in the mix. He holds up a finger and tells her it's just a little trick he picked up, acting like it's not that big of a deal. He shows her that by using a rare slime core with a basic herb, the whole potion jumps up to the same high quality as the core itself. Lyra is impressed and tells him she expected nothing less. But Hinata just gives a nervous laugh and reminds her that they're pretty poor, so he had to figure out ways to make things work with what they had. He scratches his head and mentions that he only ended up learning all this random, trivial info because of how they've been living. Lyra just stands there for a second, looking at him while she thinks over everything he just said. She suddenly asks why he doesn't just use that skill to upgrade materials and resell them for a huge profit, a thought that clearly never crossed Hinata's mind. She gets a little shy and explains she just thought he could live comfortably without even needing a guild. Hinata explains that materials he activates won't stay that way forever. If they aren't turned into potions immediately, they just wilt and revert to their original state. Lyra nods along, finally getting why he has to work so fast since it's just a temporary boost. He goes on to say that herbs aren't enough on their own to make real potions. You need slime cores too, but those only come from hunting monsters. Since Hinata isn't a fighter, he never had a way to get those materials himself, so he tells her that's why he feels like making potions is the only thing he's actually good for. He gives a little awkward laugh, mentioning that being so limited is the whole reason he got kicked out of his last guild. Lyra stops him right there, her expression turning serious as she tells him that he's totally wrong about himself. She gets a bit red in the face but looks him straight in the eye. She thinks his skill is actually amazing, and Hinata just stands there stunned. He's not used to the praise, only managing to get out a quiet thank you while the sun goes down, leaving the two of them alone under the stars. The story wraps up back at the guild hall as everyone celebrates the big win. Hinata sits right in the middle of the crowd, while his new guild mates go absolutely wild. They're yelling about how the rookie pulled off something huge and how the guild's future is finally looking bright. One guy is already dreaming about how much their profits are going to jump this month, while another shouts for someone to get Hinata a beer to celebrate. Hinata just sits there looking a bit overwhelmed, thinking about how he doesn't even drink and only had juice this afternoon. But he can't help but crack a small smile. Things are finally starting to look up for him. He realizes that he's already earned everyone's trust, and with the way things are going, it looks like they can finally relax and just live their lives. Later that night at home, Hinata finishes telling the whole story to his family, and his sister Hinajiku and his cousin Asago are both completely floored. They both start gushing over him, telling him how amazing he is for pulling that off. Hinajiku is especially excited, saying that helping out a high-ranking noble is just the most incredible thing she's ever heard of. Asago adds that the reward money from the Viscount is a huge deal. It means they won't have to worry about buying good medicine for a long time. Hinata looks at his family with a huge, genuine smile. He tells them he's just really happy he could finally bring them some good news for once. He admits that he's put a lot of stress on them lately, and knows he's always leaning on Asago to handle everything at home, while Hinajiku just listens with a peaceful look on her face. Hinata watches her, thinking about how he just wants her to stay in good spirits so she can get healthy again as soon as possible. As they sit around the table, he tells himself he needs to work even harder than before. The scene shifts over to the massive medical guild building the next morning, where things are already starting to get pretty tense inside as Gayak stands in front of all the employees with his arms crossed, acting like a total jerk and barking orders at everyone. He yells out the new plan, telling the whole room that from now on, they're going to have to start mixing all the potions themselves since he thinks the job is a joke anyway. He laughs it off, saying that it's literally just pouring stuff together and shouldn't be hard because if a slowpoke like Hinata could manage the work all by himself, then a room full of experts should find it easy. One of the bigger guys smugly agrees that it'll be a breeze, while Rena pipes up to tell the guild master they've totally got this. Gayak brags to the whole room that firing Hinata just saved the guild a massive amount of money. And just like that, the staff starts cheering like crazy while Gayak tells them all to look forward to a fat payday this month. Everyone loses it, and one guy even yells out that Gayak is the best guild master ever. The employees are thinking he's a boss who actually gets it, and Gayak notices how fired up they are. He's loving the energy because he truly believes that boosting morale like this is what makes a leader great. He notices the new doctor named Kira is cheering the loudest and thinks the guy has great reactions. He's a bit slow on the job, but he's definitely the one setting the mood for the office right now. But then Kira speaks up, pointing out that Hinata's salary was actually super low. He asks if it'll even make a difference in their paychecks, but Gayak just tells him not to worry about it at all. Behind his smug look, he's thinking about how he was paying Hinata way less than he actually earned the whole time. The truth was, the guild actually had a massive pile of money left over, leaving Hinata staring at the records completely confused by where it all came from. Back at the office, Gayak tells the staff he only held out on them because his old man was watching the books. But now he's bragging that he can do whatever he wants starting this month. The whole room starts cheering for him, and then Gayak tells everyone they're heading straight to the warehouse right now. The staff is all for it, so they follow him right through the doors to go check out their supplies. Just looking at the door makes Gayak think of Hinata and gets him heated. He steps inside and immediately asks what the hell is going on with all the stuff inside. One of the doctors picks up a plant and says every single one of these materials is pure garbage, and the rest of the crew realizes the supplies are all damp and useless. They can't believe how bad it is, and Gayak starts losing it, yelling that the shitty potion maker took advantage of them never checking the warehouse to slack off on the work. He's absolutely fuming about it, while one of his guys says that firing Hinata was definitely the right call. The The doctor yells that it doesn't matter how they mix these materials because they're all completely useless. Since the ingredients are trashed, he says they'll have to rely on their current stockpile of potions for the day. Gayak stands there thinking, mentioning that they do have some finished potions left, but he's clearly stressed because he knows it's only a matter of time before they run out of stock. He snaps and tells Renat to place a massive order for new materials right now. Renat looks right at him and gives a quick answer, agreeing to get it done. She confirms she understands the situation, and then the scene shifts over to the main entrance of the World Tree Guild, where things are looking a lot more professional. Hinata looks pretty surprised, asking if his new job is really just supervising the potions. Lyra confirms it with a smile, explaining that the plan is to finally create an original brand of potions just for their guild. Lyra looks right at him and says she wants him to be the one in charge of the whole project, which really catches Hinata off guard. He says that's a massive amount of responsibility for a guy who just started, wondering if they're overestimating him. Even so, he tells her he'll take the job if she's really okay with him doing it. Lyra gets excited and tells him they're all counting on him as Hinata starts looking through the paperwork she handed over. He tries to get a handle on the details, but Lyra points out the budget and the total number of potion bottles they're planning to produce for their first run. Hinata takes one look at the numbers and completely loses it, asking if he's actually reading the budget correctly. Lyra sees his reaction and gets a little worried, asking if the money isn't enough. Hinata tells her it's the exact opposite problem and he's basically shouting now, asking if she's actually serious about giving him such a huge amount of money to work with. Lyra just smiles and says it's fine, explaining that potions are going to be their most important product soon. She adds that on top of the business side, she's personally just really into the kind of potions Hinata can make. Hinata looks at the huge budget and tells Lyra that with this kind of money, he's positive he can actually meet her high expectations. Later on, he sits down to brainstorm some ideas for original potions, thinking that there isn't much point in just making something average or ordinary. He knows that for this to work, he has to find a way to make his products really stand out from the rest. He thinks back to his time at the medical guild, where they basically just stuck to the basics like antidotes and anesthesia, along with some simple auxiliary potions used during magical surgery. He wants to do more than that, so he grabs some herbs and decides the best way to start is by making a standard potion to use as a foundation. He activates his material boost skill to get a medicinal herb and a slime core ready for the process, and then uses his compounding skill to wrap things up, ending with a solid, low-grade healing potion. Now that he's got the base finished, Hinata starts looking around for the next set of ingredients to take things to the next level. He pulls out some higher-grade materials, including a jar of spider eyes and a weird-looking witch carrot, and since he's got everything ready, he triggers his medicine compounding skill to start the creation process, which results in a rank B minor mana potion that works for restoring mana. Moving on, Hinata finishes up both the health and mana potions and looks at them, thinking that it's finally time to try mixing the two of them together. Now, brewing usually goes faster with skills, but doing things by hand is also an option, especially since he knows there are some things his skills just can't handle on their own. He carefully watches the mixture to see if he's doing it right, and then notices that getting the heat just right is actually the hardest part. It really stings remembering how he got fired because his old bosses thought any random person could do this. Hinata feels confident because he knows he's actually really good at this, and since he's spent years ordering and brewing all kinds of stuff for his little sister, he's got the experience to successfully finish a rank B low-grade dual recovery potion. Just then, Lyra shows up right behind him and tells him he's actually quite good at that. Hinata jumps back totally shocked and asks her how long she's even been standing there, but Lyra just looks back with a smile and tells him it's a secret. His heart is still racing as he tries to stay calm and asks if she needed something, so she says it was nothing and that she was just wondering how he was doing. Then she turns around and tells him she's going to be heading back now, leaving Hinata standing there totally confused, watching her walk away while she hums to herself. Hinata stands there completely flustered, thinking there's no way it's true, and wonders if Lyra was actually checking up on him, but he quickly shakes the idea out of his head, telling himself that Lyra is way too busy for that. He keeps shaking his head while thinking she definitely wouldn't go out of her way just to worry about someone like him, so he convinces himself she only showed up to make sure he's doing his job the right way. He pumps his fist and remembers he's still just a rookie in the guild, which means he really needs to step it up and do his absolute best. Then something else clicks in his mind as he starts thinking about the people using his work. He realizes that adventurers are the main ones buying these potions, and it hits him that they probably have to drink them right in the middle of a crazy battle. So he looks over at the supplies and decides he needs to change his approach based on that. Hinata picks up a bumpy fruit and thinks about how much better things would be if it was actually easy to eat. especially since this thing is a sponge plum, a weird fruit known for soaking up liquid just like a kitchen sponge. He decides to give it a shot and says he'll just cut it down to the perfect size. And once he's done, it hits him that if he soaks these pieces in that special potion he finished earlier, it could change everything. He gets himself pumped up because this combo doesn't just heal. It works as a painkiller and stops bleeding too, making him realize that adventurers won't have to lug around heavy bottles anymore. They can just grab a piece and eat it one-handed. It's basically a fast, tasty way to get back in the game during a fight. And looking at the finished product, Hinata is absolutely certain that this new invention is going to sell like crazy once people see it. He thinks he needs to find someone to do a quick taste test right now. But as he turns around, he sees someone and realizes it's just the stock delivery guy standing there, looking a little confused by all the excitement. Hinata tells the delivery guy that since he's probably beat from all that heavy lifting, he'll really like this. And as he holds out the cup, he explains that it's a brand new kind of potion. The delivery guy is pretty surprised, so Hinata asks him if he wouldn't mind giving it a quick taste test. The guy looks at the snack and thinks it looks delicious, though he can't help but point out in the next moment that it really doesn't look like any potion he's ever seen before. He decides to go for it anyway and pops a piece of the soaked fruit into his mouth to see what all the hype is about. He suddenly shouts out as this crazy burst of energy hits his system, and he's totally shocked because all that deep muscle pain is just disappearing. He says he can't believe it because he was hurting so bad, making Hinata feel pretty good about himself since the experiment actually worked. He's hyped that it functions just like a potion, and he tells the guy the best part is that it tastes great too, while a couple of people nearby start to notice the commotion. The delivery guy keeps talking about the snack, saying the slight bitterness and spongy texture go together perfectly, and suddenly a guy nearby points at the cup and yells that it looks amazing, asking for a taste too. Hinata stands there surrounded as more people start complaining that it's not fair and they want some as well. They start passing samples around and one guy gets so hyped he throws his hands up, asking when they'll finally be able to buy this stuff because he's sure having a snack like this during work would totally wipe out all his fatigue. Everyone is losing it, and they start shouting for Hinata to make sure he lets them know the very second it goes on sale. As people keep yelling about how they're definitely buying it, Hinata clenches his fist, realizing this could be huge for sales. He thinks about how nice everyone is being, so he ends up taking down their names and promising to keep them posted. But the next step is showing the plan to Lyra. He brings her the paperwork, and she just stares at it, asking if he's actually serious, shouting in total disbelief that he thinks he can actually make this happen with such a small budget. Hinata looks a bit worried and asks if there's some kind of problem, but Lyra shouts back that it's actually the exact opposite. She's just losing it because of the numbers on the page, asking him if he's really sure it's okay to sell these things so cheap. Lyra points out that potions are usually way too expensive for something like this. Hinata just scratches his head with a smile, telling her his skills helped cut down the production costs a ton. He starts explaining the process, saying the actual amount of potion in each snack isn't that high since it's just soaked into the sponge plums. Turns out, only a few drops per piece are needed to get the job done. Lyra stares at the report, still completely shocked, and she says the whole situation is just abnormal. It's hard for her to wrap her head around it, but she finally realizes this means they can offer the product at a price that's going to flip the market upside down. Hinata points his finger up and tells her that is exactly what he's going for. He wants to make sure that by keeping the price this low, they can reach people way beyond just the usual adventure crowd. Hinata keeps going with his plan, explaining how these could even be a snack for regular workers, which means they can basically sell to anyone, not just high-end adventurers. He's looking at a massive market, and Lyra is trying to keep up with the logic, asking if he really just soaks the potion straight into the fruit like that. She's a bit skeptical and asks if doing that just waters down the actual healing effect of the potion. Hinata explains that it's fine because the sponge plums have their own natural health perks that balance it out. He tells her that chewing it slowly lets the body soak up the potion perfectly, and Lyra thinks that's actually pretty brilliant. Curious about the taste, Lyra asks if she can have a sample, and Hinata tells her to help herself. She picks up one of the soaked fruit sticks and takes a bite to see what the hype is about. Her face lights up immediately and she admits it's actually delicious, looking totally satisfied with the flavor. She asks if he's sure about this, while it turns out this simple snack was about to make them both incredibly rich. Lyra is totally on board, so Hinata suggests they start selling the new snack right away, and he's just relieved that his plan actually worked out and she likes the product. They decide to name the treat Fruit of the World Tree after the guild, and it looks like a winner. Meanwhile, back at the medical guild, things are pretty tense as someone yells for the guild master. One of the workers shows up to tell Gayak that the materials he ordered are finally there. Gayak is looking pretty rough, He says he can finally get back to mixing potions, but he's still bitter, complaining about how much of a mess Hinata left him with. He brags about how his instructions will save the day and they'll manage just fine, but then he sees something weird. He calls over the worker who brought the crates, sounding pretty confused about the delivery, because when he reaches into the crate, he finds nothing but dead, useless leaves and asks what this is supposed to be. Gayak loses his cool, shouting about whether these materials are actually new, while the delivery guy insists they should be. The worker tries to back himself up, saying the shipment literally just got there a second ago. But Gayak isn't having it. He points at the crates and asks why everything they brought is total garbage. The worker stares at the mess in disbelief, realizing that it really is as bad as the guild master says. Gayak keeps ranting, saying this stuff is exactly the same as the junk they already have sitting in the warehouse. He's completely fed up, yelling that there was no point in even wasting time on a new order. Looking for someone to blame, Gayak shouts for Rena, who jumps and quickly answers him. He gets right in her face, reminding her she was the one in charge of the order and demanding to know what went wrong. Rena looks totally lost. She says she just placed the order the exact same way she always does. Gayak doesn't want to hear it and barks at her to shut up and stop making excuses for the mess. Gayak snaps and hits Rena right across the face, calling her a worthless worm while she screams out, he's completely lost it, yelling about how much he hates people who make excuses or try to play him for a fool. Clenching his fist, he makes it clear that he isn't going to show any mercy even if he's dealing with a girl. Kira rushes over to hold the sobbing Rena, telling the guild master how messed up this is, but Gayak just tells her to shut up and calls her trash, even asking if she wants to get hit next. Kira doesn't back down though, telling him he can hit her as much as he wants instead. She just wants him to stop hitting women altogether, standing her ground despite being visibly shaken. Gayak pauses and just stares at her for a second, looking a little confused by the whole situation. Suddenly, he asks Kira if she actually has feelings for Rena, which makes Kira totally freeze up and blush. Gayak looks away for a moment, just sighing to himself as the tension in the room stays heavy. Gayak grabs the delivery guy by the shirt, yelling that Rena is his woman. He doesn't see anything wrong with doing whatever he wants with her. The delivery guy is shaking, but he secretly thinks Gayak is just a spoiled brat who hasn't grown up at all. He wonders if this skinny guy is actually trying to act tough and defy him, but there's something about the situation that's making him hesitate. Gayak gets this creepy, sharp grin on his face and says he has another reason for what he's doing. He tells the guy it's fine because Rena is actually a pervert who likes getting hit, and then he asks her to back him up. Rena stands there crying and hiding her face, but she actually whispers a yes to confirm his lies. The delivery guy is just disgusted, groaning under his breath while he looks at Rena in total disbelief. Gayak's eyes flare up behind his glasses as he tells the guy it's time to get even stricter with him since he won't back down. Leaning in close, Gayak straight up threatens to kill him if he ever opens his mouth like that again. The delivery guy bows down low and apologizes to the guild master, while Gayak just turns his back and walks away. Gayak stands there with his arms crossed while the delivery guy bows down low, and he tells him it's fine as long as he understands, but then he shifts his focus to something else. Looking at some wilted, dead-looking plants, Gayak demands to know why the materials they received are nothing but trash, and then he calls out to everyone nearby. He's clearly losing his cool and yells for someone to bring him the merchant who sold them those garbage materials. A guy wearing a turban shows up with a big smile and introduces himself as Merida the merchant, acting like everything is totally fine. He looks pretty happy with himself, even thanking them for their continued business despite the tension. Gayak sits at a table while Rena serves him tea, and he tells Merida to cut the small talk because he's really pissed off. So Merida sits down across from him and asks if there was actually something wrong with what he brought. Gayak gets this annoyed look on his face and tells the guy to just look at the stuff behind him. He points right at the bins of dried up leaves and says those are the material items that just arrived today. Merida just holds his teacup and looks over, calmly confirming that those are the right items. Gayak looks like he's about to snap, asking the merchant if he's actually trying to mess with him, and he keeps going, demanding to know what's up with this mountain of garbage materials they just got. Merida just looks at him and repeats what he said before, confirming the order was for 2,000 F-rank herbs. Gayak yells at the top of his lungs, asking who would even order stuff like this, but Merida just tells him flat out he's the one who did it. The guild master stands there looking completely lost, so Merida reminds him again that the delivery is exactly what was ordered. Gayak loses it and slams his fist on the table, screaming for the merchant to stop lying to his face, but Merida doesn't even flinch, just holding out a piece of paper and asking him to actually read the order form. He points out that based on their first contract, the Merchant Guild is only supposed to sell F-rank materials to them, and Gayak starts sweating as he looks at the document, unable to believe what's written right in front of him. He starts shaking while reading the fine print. Turns out the budget was set so low that they had to buy junk just to meet the order size. Gayak looks at the paper in total shock. He just can't get over the word budget staring back at him. Merida doesn't sugarcoat it, telling him straight up that the budget they gave the potion maker was tiny, but that's exactly what Hinata told them to expect when he put in the very first order for the guild. Gayak grits his teeth, wondering why a guy like Hinata would go out of his way to do something like this. He yells about how he'll never forgive the kid, especially since the stuff they delivered is basically trash and completely useless to them. Merida just explains that Hinata had to get creative and use his skills to make it work. Gayak freezes, realizing he's never heard anything about Hinata having special skills, while Merida just acts surprised. The merchant leans back and mentions how Hinata can actually pull off making decent potions even out of junk. He says the whole thing is honestly amazing and makes him feel super jealous of that kind of talent. Gayak is left reeling, his mind racing as he tries to process the fact that Hinata could actually do something like that. Merida explains that if the guild just hands those specific materials over to Hinata, he'll be able to sort everything out, then asks if the kid is just off for the day. Gayak loses his cool and yells that he fired Hinata so he's gone for good, while Merida just stands there in shock, telling Gayak he really did something stupid this time. Gayak screams at him to shut up and calls him the idiot instead, then points at the junk and says he's returning it all. Merida looks completely stunned by the outburst, barely able to find his words as he tells Gayak there's no way he's taking it back, especially since the order was Gayak's mistake from the start. Gayak stands there shaking with rage, his face completely twisted as he tries to hold it together. He can't believe the nerve of the guy, wondering what the hell is wrong with this merchant. The guy is absolutely fuming, repeating over and over how much everything about this situation pisses him off. Gayak is absolutely losing it, pointing his finger and screaming that he'll kill the guy. He tells the merchant not to talk back to him while he stands there shaking with rage. He's convinced that everything going wrong right now is all Hinata's fault, so he yells at Kira to throw the merchant out of the building right now. Gayak keeps swearing under his breath while Kira nervously tries to obey, but Merida doesn't go quietly. He yells back at the guild master, asking who the hell he thinks he is to treat people this way. As the merchant storms out the door, he shouts that he's officially done with them and has no more herbs to sell the guild, and Gayak just adjusts his glasses, looking completely disgusted. He mutters about how trashy it is having to do business with guys like that. He tries to act like he's the one ending the partnership, but even he has to admit the whole situation was a complete disaster, which leads to Renaa stepping up and bowing her head. She apologizes for the mess, saying she should have checked the order better. Gayak doesn't go easy on her at all, calling her incompetent to her face. She just takes it, promising to be more careful in the future as Gayak stares off, deciding it's time to move on to whatever else is on his plate for the day. Someone stares at the crates of leaves, wondering what to do with all of them, while back at the guild building, Hinata shows up and notices something is off. He looks around and asks where Lyra went since he can't find her anywhere, even though they were supposed to be sitting down to talk about the potion together. A clerk with glasses stops him and points down the hall, saying Lyra is actually in the reception room. Hinata is surprised to hear she's there, but the guy explains that she's currently tied up in a business meeting with a man sitting across from her. Inside, Lyra is pitching hard, showing off some fruit she calls the fruit of the world tree, and she even holds up a jar of specialty sticks, claiming this is going to be their new flagship product. The businessman just rubs his chin, thinking over everything she just said. The businessman isn't making it easy, telling Lyra that nobody is going to trust a new potion from a brand new guild. But Lyra tries to push back, insisting that the quality of the product speaks for itself. It's pretty clear the talks are hitting a wall, and Hinata watches from the side as the guy sits there, completely unmoved, until Lyra notices Hinata and waves him over to come take a seat with them. She tells him that since he's the one who made it, he'll be much better at convincing the guy. And while Hinata isn't sure if he should even be part of such a big meeting, he steps up anyway. The businessman just laughs it off, asking what a low-level potion maker thinks he's doing here, reminding everyone that this is a serious business meeting. But Hinata doesn't back down. Instead, he introduces himself and says he's going to show off exactly what he can do. And with a determined look, he gets ready to prove his skills to everyone in the room. Hinata places a hand on his chest and says he designed the potion himself, so he can be the one to explain the product to the man in full detail, stepping up to take the lead. The businessman grunts and says it seems like Hinata at least has some decent manners, as he sits back with his arms crossed, finally showing he's actually willing to listen to the pitch. Hinata starts things off by asking the man how a certain deal sounds to him, reaching out a hand, and saying that if the man decides to purchase these specific new potions, he will also include an equal amount of regular, conventional potions for free as part of the package. The The businessman is completely shocked by the offer. The kid is basically proposing a massive buy one get one deal. The man can't believe what he's hearing, asking Hinata if a deal like that is even possible, leaning in close to ask if he's just messing with him, because the whole thing sounds like a steal. Hinata looks the guy right in the eye and tells him the deal is definitely possible, explaining that the standard potions are made from stuff that usually gets thrown away, so mass-producing them costs next to nothing, which completely catches the man off guard. The businessman is stumbling over his words. He asks how Hinata even figured out a process like that. Hinata just keeps it cool and tells him the whole secret is in his specific skill set, but he can't really go into the specifics since it's a trade secret, leaving the guy rubbing his chin in thought. He says he can see now that Hinata isn't just some average potion maker, and he admits he probably needs to take back everything he said before they started talking business. Hinata doesn't let it go to his head though. He just says the guild has a really well-stocked inventory to work with. He gets a look in his eye like he's ready to close the sale, asking the man one last time if he'll give the offer a try while the businessman sits there thinking it over. The businessman mentions that his guild master is actually really strict, and he's worried about what they'll say if they stock a potion no one knows and it flops. Hinata has a solution, suggesting they sign a timed exclusivity agreement, which makes the guy repeat the idea back while he tries to process it. Hinata explains he'll only give these products to their guild for the first half of the deal, arguing that it'll help them stand out from other shops and really drive up their sales. The guy starts coming around, admitting that those terms might even convince his strict boss. Hinata starts second-guessing himself, wondering if he overstepped by making all these calls alone. But Lyra gives him a wink from the side, telling him that everything is looking great, and the businessman finally snaps out of it, shouting that he's in and they should make a contract. The businessman looks pretty impressed, telling Hinata that while his potion skills are great, he's clearly got a talent for business too. But Hinata just laughs it off, telling the guy he's only being modest because he's so easy to talk to. The guy laughs and says Hinata definitely has a way with words, which leads to him throwing out a surprise offer, asking Hinata if he'd be down to join his guild instead. Hinata doesn't hesitate and gives a friendly laugh, telling the guy he's going to have to pass on that one, explaining that he's still got a lot of goals he wants to reach at his current guild for now. The businessman starts writing on his clipboard, nodding along and saying he gets it since it can't be helped. Then he heads for the door, waving and telling Hinata to hit them up if he ever finds himself struggling to make a living. Once the guy is gone, Lyra admits that Hinata really surprised her back there standing there with stars in her eyes, looking completely blown away by what he just did. Lyra stands there with stars in her eyes, looking totally starstruck as she tells Hinata she can't believe he's actually got such a natural talent for business. Hinata just laughs and scratches the back of his head, playing it cool while he explains that he only learned the ropes by dealing with merchants back at his old guild, and Lyra looks right at him, telling him that hearing him say that is actually a huge relief for her. She looks down a bit shyly, admitting she's actually pretty embarrassed because she still doesn't feel like she knows the first thing about running a guild, but Hinata just gives her a kind smile and tells her that's not true at all. Before she can say anything else, Hinata reaches out and starts patting her on the head, telling Lyra she's doing an amazing job keeping his hand there as he reassures her that she's really fulfilling all her duties as the guild master perfectly. Lyra completely freezes up, her entire face turning bright red while she barely manages to stammer out Hinata's name in total shock. Hinata catches himself and quickly pulls his hand back, looking pretty awkward as he tells her he's sorry for the sudden move, trying to play it off by saying he's just so used to patting his little sister's head that it's become a total habit for him. Hinata gets all flustered and realizes he messed up, admitting he was being way too disrespectful to the guild master just now, but Lyra starts waving her hands around, telling him it's really not like that and she was just caught off guard. She stands there with her face totally red, trying to find the right words to say while looking super embarrassed. In a quiet voice, she admits that being treated like that actually made her happy, which leaves Hinata sounding pretty confused. Lyra starts panicking and yells that it's nothing, while Hinata just watches her flail wondering why she's so thrilled. After the awkward moment settles down a bit, Hinata tries to get things back on track, saying he's sorry for just going ahead and deciding on all those business conditions without asking her first. But Lyra doesn't mind at all, giving him a bright look and saying that's not a problem for her. She reminds him that all these profits only happened because of his hard work anyway, so she decides to move on to the next thing they need to handle. Lyra is all smiles as she explains that a brand new guild won't ever get off the ground without selling quality stuff and building up trust. She's totally hyped up, saying the most important thing right now is just getting their name out there to the public. Watching her, Hinata is actually pretty impressed and thinks to himself that Lyra really puts a lot of thought into the business. It makes him realize that being a guild master is a seriously tough job, which brings back some pretty bad memories of Gayak being a total nightmare. Though Hinata quickly decides it's better to just forget about that dude entirely. Just as they're talking, Hinata's eyes light up as a sudden realization hits him. He tells Lyra he just had a massive lightbulb moment, which catches her off guard and makes her ask what's going on. He starts pointing out the fruit from the world tree and mentions how they should use it for something special. And then he throws out the idea of making a version of their product that actually has alcohol in it. Lyra's face lights up and she repeats the idea, looking completely sold on the thought of an alcoholic drink. Lyra is totally hyped, clapping her hands and saying that Hinata's idea sounds like something everyone is going to love. She points out that having 2 different versions will let them sell to all kinds of people, so she tells Hinata she's leaving the details to him. She's honestly floored that he could even come up with such a killer plan on the fly. It turns out this one small suggestion from Hinata was a massive turning point, one that would eventually end up making the guild an absolute fortune. Meanwhile, back at the old medical guild, things aren't going nearly as well as someone yells out. Gayak is looking completely stressed out, pointing at crates of trash and demanding that his staff do something about the mountain of junk materials. He's desperate at this point, telling them they need to find anyone willing to take the stuff off their hands just to get rid of it. Kira starts sweating and panicking, telling the boss that it's just not possible and they have no choice but to throw it all away. Kira is just standing there with his hands up, looking totally overwhelmed and confused by the whole mess. Gayak is losing his mind, complaining about how useless people always say everything is impossible. He's even tempted to just throw all the trash away himself. But then he realizes he needs a real fix. So he yells at Kira to go find a merchant who actually sells good ingredients. Kira freaks out and runs to do it, and Gayak tries to stay calm, thinking that it's fine because he still has a ton of money to just buy his way out of this mess. A little later, Kira comes back looking stressed and introduces a merchant named Norwia, who walks in and asks if he's talking to the guild master Gayak. Gayak puts on a fake polite face and welcomes the guy, telling him to take a seat so they can talk. The merchant sits down and mentions he heard the guild is looking for potion ingredients, leading Gayak to confirm it. He says he needs real materials, not the low-quality crap he's been stuck with lately. Merida listens and suggests they look at some C-rank items if he's looking for a step up in quality. Gayak acts like he's doing the guy a favor, huffing a bit before saying he guesses it's fine to talk, but he's clearly stressed about the budget, thinking about how he can't afford to buy A or B rank stuff in bulk. He knows that if he goes too cheap with D or E rank materials, the potions will just be garbage and fail constantly, so he tries to find a middle ground to fix the guild's supply problems. Merida lays out the deal, telling him that 2,000 C-rank herbs will run him 85,000 gold. Gayak can't even process it. He starts freaking out immediately, yelling about how some simple herbs could ever cost that much. Merida just looks at him like he's crazy, saying that as far as he knows, that's just the normal price everyone pays. Gayak is absolutely fuming now, screaming that he has never paid more than 10,000 gold for his supplies before, and he demands the merchant match that price, telling him to stop being so unreasonable about the whole thing. The merchant just looks at him and asks if that 10,000 gold price was actually for the lowest F-rank herbs instead. The merchant doesn't budge on the price, telling Gayak there is no way he can sell materials of that rank for less, leaving Gayak completely losing his mind. He starts screaming, asking why some basic potion ingredients are even priced that high in the first place. He keeps ranting about how they're just weeds and claims that paying that much will literally bankrupt the entire medical guild, and then he tries to flex his status. He yells that he's a noble and a doctor, so the guy should be grateful he's even talking to a lowly merchant. The merchant just crosses his arms, looking totally over it. He tries to get Gayak to listen to some common sense for once, but he points out that the real issue is how many potions these doctors are constantly using up. Since they're going through supplies so fast, he tells Gayak it's obviously going to cost a ton of money and reminds him that his shop isn't a charity. He's there to run a business just like everyone else. Gayak is fuming, gritting his teeth and telling the merchant that he's being impossible to reason with. The merchant brings up how Gayak treated Merida like garbage too, but Gayak just brushes it off, calling her an obnoxious girl. The merchant in the turban is completely losing it, saying he can't believe Gayak tried to trick him into buying absolute garbage materials, and Gayak just gestures dismissively, warning the other person nearby that they better watch their back so they don't get scammed by this guy, but the merchant snaps right back, calling Gayak the one who's actually obnoxious. Gayak is stunned, standing there with his mouth open, and then he explodes with rage, demanding to know who a lowly merchant thinks he is to talk to a noble like that. The merchant doesn't flinch and drops a truth bomb, telling Gayak that his terrible reputation has already spread to every single person in the merchant community. So he points a finger right in Gayak's face, telling him straight up that nobody is ever going to do business with him again. The merchant keeps going, calling him a corrupt noble who doesn't deserve an ounce of respect, and yells that he never wants to see Gayak's face for as long as he lives. Gayak starts shaking, trying to find some words to say back, but he just loses it and screams at the man to shut up. His face is completely twisted with fury as he stands there fuming, gritting his teeth while he rants about how much he hates every single one of those merchants. Gayak screams at Merida to get out and starts throwing stuff. The merchant has to duck to avoid getting hit by a flying bottle as he runs. Gayak is huffing and puffing from the outburst, so Kira tries to check if he's doing all right. He just snaps at her, asking if he looks okay, which makes Renna freak out and apologize. Gayak goes on a rant about how they need more materials no matter what happens. Kira suggests just calling up a different merchant to help them out, but Renna looks like she's about to lose it, explaining that there isn't a single merchant left who's willing to work with their guild. She's completely stressed out, wondering how they got here, and tells Gayak straight up that it's because he keeps chasing everyone away. Gayak gets offended fast, asking if she's really trying to blame him for the mess. He's totally fuming now, thinking to himself that everyone is just trying to back him into a corner. Gayak stares off with this intense, shaky look in his eyes, wondering why everything is falling apart, and suddenly he starts thinking back to when things first started going wrong. He remembers Hinata, the guy who used to handle all their potion making, and he wonders if the guild's downward spiral actually started the very moment he kicked the kid out. But he quickly shuts that thought down, telling himself there's no way that could be the reason why. Gayak is still fuming, yelling at the top of his lungs that the guild is doing perfectly fine without a piece of trash like Hinata around. He's desperate now, telling his staff to just bring him any merchant they can find, and that he doesn't even care who it is as long as they get materials. The guy goes full villain, ordering them to drag someone in through the underground routes if they have to, making the staff member run off in a total panic. And then he just stands there with this really creepy look on his face, telling himself that he's doing the right thing. He starts thinking about how legit merchants aren't the only ones selling stuff in this city, and he remembers hearing that a lot of doctors actually have deep ties to the underworld, dealing in shady stuff like organ and human trafficking. In his head, he recalls people saying you aren't even a real, full-fledged doctor until you've dipped your toes into that dark side of the business, which leads to him breaking out into this weird, shaky laughter that just gets louder and creepier as he stands there alone. He looks completely unhinged now, clutching his collar and thinking that by crossing this line, he's finally reached the level of a first-class doctor, totally convinced that this downward spiral is actually his path to the top. Back at the medical guild, one of the staff members calls out for the guild master, letting him know that he's finally brought the merchant he asked for, a guy named Mr. Dakwa. Gayak stands there with his arms crossed, just hoping that this guy is actually decent for once, while Dakwa introduces himself with a shady smirk, saying it's a pleasure to meet the man in charge. The merchant doesn't waste any time, mentioning how he heard Gayak got blacklisted by every real merchant, which makes Gayak snap, telling him to shut up and just say if he's selling the herbs or not. Dakwa stays totally cool, telling the stressed-out guild master he'll sell him as much as he needs, so Gayak starts to look really excited, thinking he's finally caught a break in this mess. He thinks about how these black market guys have their own secret routes and use dirty methods, convinced he'll get a huge discount. He asks for the price, but then stops to think for a second. Gayak doesn't hold back and says he'll take 2,000 C-rank medicinal herbs, which gets Dakwa smiling as he agrees to the deal. But then he brings up the cost. Dakwa says it'll be 10,000 gold, leaving Gayak completely shocked by the massive price tag. Gayak loses his cool and yells that the price is way higher than what people usually pay, asking how it can be so expensive coming from a black market merchant while Dakwa just stands there. Dakwa casually tells him that if he's got a problem with it, he should just go to the regular merchants, which makes Gayak panic, worrying that the guy might actually refuse to sell to him at all. He stands there sweating and clenching his teeth, realizing he has zero leverage in this deal. Gayak snaps and says the merchant is just taking advantage of their situation, but Dakwa just shrugs it off, saying he doesn't care and Gayak can walk away if he's not happy. Renna whispers to the guild master that they have to buy the supplies despite the cost, or they won't be able to make any potions, which just makes Gayak snap at her to shut up because he already knows. Dakwa just laughs at the situation and asks if he's actually buying the stuff or not, leaving Gayak with no other choice but to scream out that he'll do it. He points a finger and yells that he'll pay the ridiculous price Dakwa is asking for, and the merchant happily thanks him for the business while Gayak stands there looking completely stressed out. Gayak adjusts his glasses and sighs, clearly drained from the whole ordeal. Meanwhile, Hinata is busy carrying a big crate of potions outside, thinking about how much of a nightmare things have been lately, but as he walks, Lyra notices a guy with a mustache nearby and tries to remember who he is. She realizes it's Merchant Jurion, the same guy who bought Hinata's potions not long ago. Jurion looks over and casually greets Hinata as he sees him passing by. Jurion breaks the news that the potions Hinata made are a massive success and every other shop in town wants a piece of the action, which catches Hinata totally off guard. So he asks if that's really true and says he's happy to hear it. Jurion laughs and says since they have the exclusive rights to sell them, he's going to enjoy making everyone else jealous, all thanks to Hinata's hard work. The two of them share a good laugh over the success, and Hinata thanks him for everything as the merchant waves goodbye and starts heading back toward the city, leaving Hinata and Lyra standing there. Lyra spins around with a huge look of excitement on her face, and she can't help but yell out that they actually did it. She's glowing as she talks about how they're finally making a real profit, and then she gets serious for a second, telling Hinata that thanks to him, the guild finally has some breathing room before bowing her head to thank him. Hinata gets all flustered seeing her bow like that, and says he's the one who should be thanking her for all the help. Hinata looks over at Lyra and tells her that if he hadn't met her that day, he really doesn't know what would have happened to him, which makes him smile as he tells her she's his soulmate. Lyra completely loses it, barely able to repeat the word as she starts blushing and tapping her fingers, nervously saying that might actually be true. She clears her throat to try and act professional, telling Hinata she's got a present for him and says the guild is going to give him his own research budget for brewing. Hinata just stands there totally stunned, asking her if she's really sure she can do that for him. Lyra lets him know he can use any materials he finds in the storehouse and says she wants him to go ahead and test out making all sorts of new potions. The storehouse is huge and packed with every material he could ever need. Hinata realizes that with the new budget and all these materials, he can finally make top-tier potions, and it hits him that his big dream is actually coming true. He's looking pretty emotional about it when Lyra speaks up, reminding him that there's more to this than just his dream, there's his sister too. She says she was thinking that more research might bring them closer to actually curing Hinajiku's sickness. Hinata is floored by this, telling Lyra he can't believe she'd go through all this trouble just for his sake. Lyra just smiles and places a heart over her heart, telling Hinata that he's already a special and important person to her. She doesn't stop there though, and goes on to say that his sister Hinajiku is also someone very precious to her now. Hearing her say all that makes Hinata's face go totally red, just standing there completely shocked by how much she cares. Lyra repeats the word precious back to herself, totally caught off guard by how much she just revealed. She immediately starts flailing her hands in a total panic, shouting that she doesn't have any hidden motives and that she just thinks his sister is a great person. She's so flustered she even asks herself what she's even saying. Hinata starts panicking just as hard as she is, waving his hands around and yelling that it's totally fine. He tells her he hasn't gotten the wrong idea at all since he knows his place, and it's because he keeps reminding himself that Lyra is the boss and the leader of the entire guild. In his head, he's convinced she only means he's an important worker, and that's as far as it goes. Lyra snaps back to reality and claps her hands together, telling him that she has one more present for him. She lets him know that his work for the day is officially done right now, and orders him to go home early for a change to get some sleep. Hinata is just left standing there confused. Lyra thinks about it for a second and tells Hinata he can take 3 days off, which totally shocks the guy. He asks if she's really sure it's okay, but she says of course it is. She winks at him and points out that he always works way too hard, and since he's finally got the time, he should go spend some quality time with his little sister. Hinata is so grateful that he bows down deep, thanking her for everything she's done, but Lyra just claps and says she's actually the one who should be thanking him. It makes him realize that she really is a wonderful person, and he starts thinking that it's crazy how much his whole life has changed just from having a better boss, so he decides to just relax with his family. He heads back and calls out that he's home, which catches Asako off guard. She looks over and asks why he's back so early today. Hinata steps through the door and calls out to Asako that he's finally back, but Asako looks at him with total suspicion, asking if he ended up getting fired again already. He completely loses it and waves his hands around, telling her that's not it at all, explaining he actually just got some time off. Right then, a soft voice calls out for him, and his little sister Hinajiku shows up in her pajamas just to tell him welcome home. Hinata gives her a big smile and tells her he's back, but she looks pretty weak tripping forward until he catches her. He lets out a quick whoops while holding her up, gently reminding her that she really needs to stay in bed and rest. Hinajiku just smiles and says she only came out to get a hug from her big brother, which makes Asako tease her for being a baby. Hinata just tells her to be a good girl and get back to sleep. Hinajiku teases him by saying she knows her big brother is going to look after her, and Hinata just sighs, telling her he gets it as he leans down to pick her up. He carries her back toward the bed, but stops for a second when he feels something strange. His eyes go wide and he looks down at her because it's like she isn't even there. He thinks about how she feels way too light in his arms, thinking to himself that it's almost like he's holding a doll or something worse. He sets her down gently and hands her a tray, telling her to finish her tea and then get some more sleep. She just gives him a sweet smile and agrees, but Hinata can't shake that feeling of how small she's become. He watches her take a sip, thinking about how that tea is supposed to be medicine. It turns out he's been trying every trick in the book, making her special drinks, finding the best potions, and cooking up the most nutritious meals he can, but none of it is actually working to make her better. Hinata keeps his hand on his sister's head, thinking to himself that doing something is better than doing nothing. He pulls the covers up to tuck her in, telling her she can finally rest easy now. Hinajiku smiles as he gently pets her head, and she soon drifts off to sleep. Looking down at her, Hinata gets this serious look and promises himself he's going to save her, no matter what. He heads out to the table where Asagao asks if she's asleep, and he confirms she's finally out cold. As they start eating, he excitedly tells her the research budget got approved, meaning he can finally start working on the medicine. Asagao looks relieved and tells him that's really great news to hear. Hinata keeps that determined look while he eats, swearing once again that he's going to save his sister. He looks over at Asagao and says he knows it's been hard on her too, but asks her to wait just a little longer. Asagao just looks at him with a worried face, telling him he really shouldn't push himself too hard. Asagao reaches out toward the table while they finish up their meal. She leans over and puts her hand on Hinata's head, telling him he's already been working hard enough. She keeps petting his hair and whispers that he's done more than enough, and Hinata just stares blankly into space, feeling a strange fog starting to settle over his mind. He thinks to himself about how the warm soup is making him feel really sleepy, and then his eyes start dropping as he realizes he needs to get to bed right away. Everything starts getting blurry, and Asagao's face turns into a soft glow while he finally loses the fight and passes out face down on the dinner table. Asagao looks down at him with a gentle smile and says it's okay for now, leaving the two of them alone in the quiet room as she tells him to rest well. Asagao looks at her brother while he sleeps at the table and whispers his name, while the scene shifts back to the medical guild building where things are getting complicated. Gayak stands there with his arms crossed, complaining that they finally have the potion ingredients, even if they cost way too much. He looks over at the crates of low-quality herbs and wonders what he's supposed to do with all this junk, so he tries to think of a way to actually use the materials instead of just letting them sit there. Rena suggests calling in Zakog, and one of the staff members runs off to find him immediately. A guy named Zakog shows up at the door looking pretty nervous and asks Gayak why he called for him. Gayak is actually happy to see him, turns out they're like brothers, and Zakog runs another doctor's guild, but Gayak tells him to sit down, and it's clear the guy is terrified because Gayak used to beat him up all the time. Once Zakog gets settled, Gayak gives him a creepy smile and tells him he's got a special present for him today. Gayak brings up how Zakog's guild is totally broke and probably struggling to buy any materials, and Zakog has to admit he's right. Gayak leans in with a crazy look on his face, telling him that his own guild actually has way more ingredients than they need. He holds up a finger and tells Zakog that since they have so much extra, he's willing to let some go for a real bargain. Zakog's eyes light up. He's completely shocked and asks if Gayak is actually being serious about this. While Zakog goes on about how much he appreciates the help, Gayak just laughs to himself about how easily the guy fell for it. Gayak puts his feet up and offers him 6,000 herbs for 60,000 gold, making it sound like a steal. Zakog is basically falling off his chair, yelling about whether it's really okay to give him such a massive discount. Gayak just gives him a smooth response, reminding him that they're supposed to be friends who look out for each other. Zakog is practically worshipping him now. He puts his hands together and thanks Gayak for being so generous. As Zakog starts to think his old bully might actually be a nice guy after all, Gayak just stands there looking like a villain. Gayak catches a vibe and adjusts his glasses, looking pretty annoyed while he asks if Zakog was just talking trash about him, which immediately sends Zakog into a total panic, waving his hands and sweating while he swears it's all just in Gayak's head. Gayak moves past it and tells him to just sign the contract already. Zakog doesn't even hesitate and signs his name right on the line. While holding the signed paper, Gayak gets this creepy look on his face, thinking about how he's finally got the guy exactly where he wants him. He tells Zakog he'll have everything sent over to his guild later today. Zakog is still clueless and just tells him that sounds perfect. Zakog literally skips away through the city streets feeling like he got a great deal. Meanwhile, Gayak just watches him go, thinking about what a complete idiot the guy is. The very next day, someone starts pounding on the door like crazy. It's Zakog, and he's screaming for Gayak to explain what's going on. Gayak opens the door looking totally unbothered and casually asks if there's some kind of problem, so Zakog holds up the supplies and yells that every single one of the ingredients he sent over is just rank F garbage. Gayak just gives him a cold look and asks so what, then he reminds him the contract specifically says they don't take any complaints, leaving Zakog completely devastated. Zakog is completely losing it, yelling that Gayak had him set up and tricked from the very beginning. Gayak just laughs in his face, telling him he's making him sound like some kind of bad guy. He doubles down and tells Zakog it's his own fault for being too lazy to check the merchandise. So Zakog stands there sweating, admitting that might be true but saying the whole thing is just way too cruel. The guy is basically in tears now, shouting that his entire guild is going to go under at this rate. Gayak doesn't care at all, he just says it's not his problem and Zakog only has his own incompetence to blame. He starts laughing like a villain, saying that thanks to this little deal, his own guild is finally safe. He even has the nerve to say thank goodness while looking totally relieved, which just shows how heartless he is as he reaches out and slams the heavy lock shut on the door. Zakog keeps pounding and screaming from the outside, but Gayak just smiles and says he doesn't care about that pathetic little guild. Gayak stands there looking way too proud of himself, saying that having fewer rival guilds around is nothing but good news for his own business, and he keeps going on about how he's a total genius, while Hinata just stands nearby letting out a long, tired sigh because back at the other guild, Zakog is slumped on the floor between a bunch of crates, totally overwhelmed by the mess he's in. He can't get over the fact that he was tricked into buying 6,000 rank F items for 60,000 gold, and he just keeps staring into space, unable to believe he actually let himself get ripped off that badly. He loses his cool for a second and slams his fist against the wooden floor, swearing under his breath until he stands up and yells that he'll never forgive Gayak for what he did, while his guild members watch him from the back. Even though he knows deep down that it was partly his own fault for being so careless with the deal, he looks at his team and realizes they're all actually such good people. And that's exactly why he makes a silent promise to himself that he has to protect this guild and everyone in it, no matter what it takes. Zakog looks completely stressed out, while asking if there is anything at all they can do to save the situation, and his guild member tries to step up. He says he's going to try talking to the neighboring merchant guilds to see if anyone can help. Zakog thanks him, feeling the weight of his role as the guildmaster. He knows he has to find a way out of this mess. Just then, one of the guys yells out Zakog's name and tells him there might actually be one guild willing to work with them. Zakog can hardly believe his ears, asking if he is actually being serious about finding help. He looks over at the huge piles of junk they are stuck with, wondering if this guild can really handle it all. But then he catches himself thinking a deal like that sounds way too good to be true. The guild member explains it is a new merchant guild called World Tree and asks if Zakog has ever heard of them. But Zakog admits he has no idea who they are honestly. He says he doesn't even care at this point as long as they are willing to help. And the member says he will set up a meeting with their rep right away. So Zakog tells him to get on it as fast as possible. It doesn't take long for the meeting to happen. Hinata shows up and introduces himself, greeting the potion maker of the World Tree. Zakog looks at Hinata and thinks about how the guy is way younger than he expected, but he stays professional and introduces himself as the head of the East District Doctors Guild. Hinata gives a friendly smile, telling Zakog that he really appreciates the meeting and isn't quite sure how to thank him enough. Zakog is impressed by how polite and reliable the kid seems, and Hinata just brushes it off, saying that guilds should always look out for each other when things get rough. The mood shifts as Zakog explains their massive problem. They're sitting on 6,000 medicinal herbs they can't sell, and the guild is basically going bankrupt because of it. He looks down, looking completely exhausted while admitting he's at the end of his rope, going as far as to say he'd do anything at all if Hinata could just help him find a way out of this mess. Hinata takes a second to think about the situation and agrees that things definitely sound like they're in a bad spot. But then he surprises Zakog by offering to just buy the whole surplus himself, leaving the guild master completely speechless. Hinata throws out an offer of 30,000 gold for the lot, which sounds like an impossible amount of money to Zakog. Seeing Zakog freak out, Hinata asks what's wrong, while the poor guy can barely get a word out, just stammering as he tries to process the deal. With the deal finally closed, Hinata gives a polite little bow and says he'll be heading out now. But Zakog starts stammering, telling him to wait up while Hinata looks back wondering what's wrong. The older guy is still sitting there in total shock, asking if Hinata is actually sure about buying all those herbs, since they're only F rank and basically worthless to anyone else. Hinata just gives him a bright smile and tells him not to worry, because they'll definitely find a way to make them useful, mentioning that his specific skills can handle it, though he keeps the actual process a secret. Zakog's jaw practically hits the floor as he asks if something like that is even possible, not believing that someone as young as Hinata could have that kind of talent. He starts crying and asks one more time if Hinata is for real, calling him a total lifesaver for helping them out, before grabbing Hinata's hands and shouting about how incredible the Yggdrasil Guild is, while Hinata just tries to play it down. Zakog is still reeling from the meeting, thinking it's wild that a guild this good is still a secret, so he thumps his chest and tells Hinata to come find him if he ever gets into a jam. Hinata just waves goodbye while walking off, saying he'll definitely keep that in mind, though Zakog keeps yelling after him, just standing there with a look of pure respect while thinking about Hinata the potion maker. It's clear that from this moment on, Hinata's presence in this world is starting to change, and Zakog makes a personal vow to never forget that name for as long as he lives. As Hinata walks away, the story hints at how he's about to become something way bigger than he is now. But the peaceful moment gets cut short when someone starts screaming for help in the street. The shouting gets louder as a desperate cry for help echoes all around the neighborhood. Over at the medical guild, Gayak is just trying to enjoy some tea but gets annoyed, asking what all the noise is about. The doctor looks pretty nervous while explaining that the situation is getting out of hand. It turns out some people from the orphanage are outside causing a scene, which catches the nun completely off guard. She looks totally desperate and just keeps begging for someone to help her. But inside the guild, Gayak is just casually sipping tea and asking why they're even there if they can't pay, while his staff complains about what a pain they are. Gayak loses his cool and orders his guys to go shut them up. So one of the doctors salutes and heads for the window. He leans out and yells at the crowd that if they don't have any money, they aren't getting any medical treatment. He keeps shouting, telling the nun to just go home since she's only bothering the guild master. And the nun can't believe what she's hearing. She's just standing there wondering how they could be so cold. She literally drops to the floor and begs them, explaining that the orphans have terrible fevers and are actually dying. But Gayak just takes another sip of tea, saying it serves them right and that he honestly couldn't care less how many orphans die. The doctor makes it clear they aren't running a charity, leaving the nun totally desperate as she shouts that she'll do anything to repay them. She even offers to have the kids help with chores and weeding once they're better, but the doctor just seems confused by the offer. He snaps at her, saying the medical guild is no place for orphans to even step foot in. The guy keeps going, asking what she'll do if she ends up infecting all his rich, noble patients. The nun can't believe how mean he's being and tells him God is watching his every move, which just makes the doctor mock her, calling them the awful ones for being all talk with zero cash. Feeling like she has no other choice, she offers up her own body if it means she can finally get him to save the children's lives. The doctor just closes his eyes and says he has no interest in a pathetic pauper like her. The doctor looks away with a smug grin, reminding the nun that he's a noble and a doctor. He makes it clear he isn't exactly desperate for women, so the guild just kicks them both to the curb. The nun lets out a frustrated sigh as she leads the child away into the dark alley, while back inside, Hinata sits back with a cup of tea. He tells Kira he did a good job handling things, and the noble doctor joins him, gesturing with his hand while calling those poor people a cancer that's just infesting the town. He warns that helping them even once just makes them get cocky and demand everything. Hinata just nods along, saying he supposes he's right. The guy is pretty sure they won't be showing their faces again after getting chased off so hard. He really doubts they'll ever come back, but the next day rolls around. Hinata and the doctor are out walking through the city streets when suddenly the nun appears out of nowhere. She looks completely drained as she yells for them to please wait, then she gets right in their way with tears in her eyes, begging them for help one last time. She actually grabs onto Hinata's arm, catching him totally off guard as she tells him she's willing to do absolutely anything. Kira loses his temper and screams at the nun to shut up and get her hands off him, shoving her back so hard that she completely loses her footing and goes flying backward. The nun hits the floor and just stays there looking totally dazed and out of it. Kira looks down at her with a cold expression, saying it's just a mild concussion and that leaving her there won't kill her, so Hinata tells the unconscious woman she's in the way, then orders Kira to clean up the trash. Kira gives her one last shove with his foot to clear the path and decides that's good enough. With that settled, Hinata stands tall with his arms crossed and tells everyone it's time to start their real work, but he starts laughing like a maniac, saying that a job helping people is the absolute best because they get paid and thanked. He keeps going, shouting about how no other job is as noble or satisfying as what they do for a living. He really thinks they're special compared to everyone else, especially people like those sisters at the orphanage. Kira is still on his high horse, ranting about how just breathing the same air as commoners makes him sick, while he pauses for a second, a weird look in his eye, and then shouts that he's actually fine with it as long as they pay up. He keeps yelling with his arms crossed, saying he'd even save a commoner if the money was right. Moving on to the town square, people are just going about their day walking through the streets, and then there's Hinata, walking by himself with a bag over his shoulder looking pretty drained. He suddenly hears a commotion and looks back to see a crowd of people gathered around something. Hinata sees the nun lying face down on the pavement. He can't believe his eyes, so he rushes over and kneels down, asking if she's okay while she just lets out a faint groan. He looks at her pale face and realizes it's serious, saying he has to get her to a hospital immediately. Hinata looks down at the nun and realizes his old medical guild is close. But he's really torn because he knows Gayak is a total jerk who probably wouldn't even lift a finger to help a commoner like her. Besides, he doesn't have the cash to pay their crazy fees, and even thinking about asking that guy for help just makes him sick. So he decides the best move is to take her straight to the Yggdrasil World Tree Guild instead. As he carries her through the streets, he stays confident that he can cure whatever's wrong with her using his own potions. And later the nun finally starts to wake up, letting out a small groan as her eyes flutter open. She sits up in the bed, looking around the unfamiliar room and wondering where she ended up. She tries to piece it together, remembering she went to the medical guild for help, but then everything goes blank until Hinata asks if she's finally awake. Hinata stands right there by the bedside, bringing her a fresh glass of water to help her recover. He sees her confusion and quickly lets her know she's safe at the World Tree Merchant Guild. The kid introduces himself as Hinata the potion maker to the nun, and she looks like she's finally calming down. She realizes he's the one who looked after her while she was out, so she gives him a sincere thank you. Hinata just smiles and brushes it off, saying it was just a light bruise and a high-grade potion fixed her right up. But the second he mentions the high-grade potion, the nun completely loses it because those things are crazy rare and expensive. She starts panicking about how much it cost and asks how she could ever possibly pay him back for something like that. Hinata tells her to relax since he did it because he wanted to and doesn't need a single thing in return, which just leaves her staring at him like he's some kind of saint, thinking to herself about what a truly wonderful person he is. She can't believe he'd go that far for a total stranger without asking for anything. And as she looks at him, it all starts to click in her head, and she realizes that this guy must be Hinata-sama, deciding he's basically an angel sent by God. She lunges at him and straight up asks him to marry her. Hinata is completely caught off guard by the sudden proposal and yells out in total shock. The nun just leans in with sparkling eyes and begs him to marry her, while Hinata desperately asks why she'd even say something so crazy. She gets all bashful and starts fidgeting, explaining that she literally couldn't think of any other way to pay him back for saving her. But she tells him not to worry since she can actually clean up pretty well if she tries, which just makes Hinata even more flustered as he tries to wave it off. He accidentally lets it slip that he already thinks she's a beautiful person, but he realizes how that sounds way too late. He tries to take it back immediately, but the nun just smiles and tells him he's clearly just being shy about his feelings. Hinata is sweating bullets and tries to talk some sense into her, but she just brushes him off and says it's only a matter of time until she makes him fall for her for real, leaving Hinata looking like his brain is about to melt from the pressure. He honestly asks her if she hit her head too hard because she's acting totally hysterical and definitely needs to lie back down. She just gives him a cheeky wink and tells him she's actually perfectly sane, and she's not backing down. Maria gives him a playful wink and corrects him. She says not to just call her sister, but to call her sister Maria. Hinata gets all flustered and stammers out her name, desperately telling her she needs to just stay in bed and rest. He's sweating from the awkwardness and reminds her that she's still a patient under his care. Maria thinks about it and agrees he has a point, though she accidentally calls him Lady Hinata in the heat of the moment. She admits that proposing to a guy the literal second you wake up probably isn't the most normal thing to do. She asks if he really thinks it's that weird, especially since he's the one who actually saved her life. Hinata just looks exhausted and tells her she's definitely exaggerating what happened, but Maria won't hear it, putting her hand over her heart and insisting that he really did save her. She closes her eyes and says she needs to thank him properly one more time, but then a look of total confusion hits her face as she realizes she's actually forgetting something pretty important. Maria looks pretty confused as she tries to figure out how she even got into this mess, but then her eyes snap open as she suddenly remembers something huge and she jumps straight out of bed, yelling that she has to get back to the orphanage immediately. Hinata panics and asks what she's doing, telling her she absolutely needs to stay in bed. He tells her there's no way he can let her leave in her condition, but Maria doesn't care and explains that the kids at the orphanage are all sick. She starts tearing up, saying they're probably suffering from terrible fevers right now, and she knows for a fact those kids are just waiting for her to finally come home. The room goes quiet for a second as the pieces start falling into place, and Zakog realizes she was just another victim who got treated like total trash by Gayak. Lyra jumps in saying they can make this work, and Hinata immediately tells Maria he's going to help her out, leaving Maria completely stunned as the plan starts moving. It turns out the guild just got a massive shipment of low-grade herbs that are too beat up to put on the shelves, but Hinata realizes they're perfect for making basic health potions. He explains they can easily process the batch into E-rank medicine, and he suggests that the World Tree Guild should just donate the whole lot directly to the orphanage to help the sick kids. Maria is caught completely off guard, staring at him with her hand over her mouth like she can't believe what she's hearing. She's so overwhelmed that she starts blushing, asking if he's actually being serious about giving them all that for free. Hinata gets a little worried and asks if that's not actually enough help, while Maria starts waving her hands around frantically, trying to tell him he's already doing way too much. She looks like she's about to cry as she asks if it's really okay for her orphanage to accept such a massive act of charity, but Hinata just gives her a look and says the guild would actually be the ones feeling grateful if she'd just let them help. Maria completely loses it and starts calling him an angel sent from above, even telling him he's basically God himself for being so kind. Maria is crying happy tears, saying she can't believe he's saving both her and the kids, but Hinata just gets embarrassed and tells her she's making way too big a deal out of it. He explains that he just wants the kids to be healthy, and he gives her a big, honest smile, saying he really just wants to see them keep happy. Maria asks if they should head to the orphanage right away, looking at him with total respect and calling out his name like he's a hero. She tells him he's a wonderful person, but Hinata is already focused on the work, saying they have to get the potions ready first. Maria is shocked and asks if he's really starting right now, and Hinata tells her he'll have the whole batch whipped up in no time. Maria's jaw drops as she asks if producing 6,000 units is even possible for one person, while Hinata casually explains that with his special crafting skill, he can finish the entire job in about 30 minutes, which makes Maria scream in total disbelief. She starts shaking, staring at him and wondering who he actually is to be this powerful. But then Lyra opens the door to tell Hinata he has a visitor, leaving him wondering who's showing up at the guild for him. Hinata looks up to see a familiar face walking in. It's Zakog, who waves and thanks Hinata for everything he did the other day. Zakog stands there looking a bit bashful, explaining that he really wanted to come by and show his appreciation. He mentions his business is finally getting back on its feet, but Hinata just tries to brush it off, saying he doesn't need any thanks. Zakog isn't taking no for an answer though, pushing a heavy wooden box toward Hinata and insisting he takes it since it'll definitely be useful. Hinata takes a look inside and completely freezes up, barely able to find his words when he sees what's in there. The box is packed with slime cores, exactly what he needs to brew up a massive batch of low-grade health potion. Hinata tells him this is perfect timing since he was just about to make potions for the orphanage, and Zakog is just glad he could help out. Zakog tells him he's always saving people one way or another, though Hinata just shrugs it off as a lucky coincidence. He's mostly just excited that his production costs just dropped through the floor, leaving Zakog smiling because he knew Hinata would be this humble. Hinata realizes that being kind really does come back around to you, and he tells Maria he'll head to the orphanage the second these are ready. Hinata tells Sister Maria she should head back and check on the children while he finishes up, and she agrees. He thinks to himself about how being a good guy really does pay off, but then he stops himself mid-thought. He wants to act cool, but there's a problem. Hinata tells Maria that looking at her condition, she really isn't in any shape to be walking around yet. Maria tries to brush it off, telling him she'll be totally fine on her own, but Hinata isn't having it. He tells her she's not going anywhere because he's actually worried about her health too. Maria just stares at him, completely touched that he cares about her that much, making things a bit awkward, so Hinata quickly adds that he's also thinking about the kids at the orphanage. He knows they must be getting stressed since she's been gone so long, and because he wants to get the medicine to them quickly, he starts trying to figure out a plan, when Lyra steps into the room and offers to head over there in their place. She says she'd be happy to help, which catches Hinata off guard. She tells him he's already worked way too hard today, so she'll handle the rest since. Layla winks and tells Hinata she can't just stand around and watch. She's gotta help when she sees him in a jam like this. Hinata gets all fired up and tells her that having her help would actually be huge, but then he feels a bit bad about it. He scratches his head and apologizes for leaning on her so much since she is his boss, but Layla doesn't mind one bit. She tells him it's totally fine and she'd do anything for him, so he should feel free to rely on her whenever. Hinata just sighs her name, looking a little overwhelmed by how nice she's being while she grabs her things and waves goodbye. As she walks off, Hinata can't help but think about what a great person she really is. Zakog sees the whole thing and starts laughing, saying the two of them are perfectly in sync. He even jokes that they act just like a married couple. That completely flusters Hinata, and he tells Zakog to quit it with the teasing because something like that is just impossible. He starts thinking about Layla being a noble, a guild leader, and a total beauty, She's so out of his league he can't even process it when Kira starts pouting at him. She gets all jealous and tells him it's impossible anyway, especially since he's already got her by his side. Zakog gets a kick out of the situation and tells Hinata he's a hit with the ladies, while Hinata tries to get Sister Maria to chill out. Lyra just stands there, looking totally annoyed by the whole scene. She huffs and holds her bag close, wondering what the deal is with this nun showing up out of nowhere, and she can't stop staring at her, feeling a serious sense of competition starting to bubble up. To Lyra, the way the woman looks at Hinata is crazy. She looks like a hunter that just found its next meal, so Lyra figures she can't just sit back anymore and decides she has to be the one to make the first move. A bit later, she shows up at the front gates of a building and realizes this must be the orphanage. It's a total dump with broken windows and boards nailed everywhere. She thinks the place is a complete wreck, but she pushes the doors open anyway and calls out to see if anyone is inside. As soon as she steps in, a massive cloud of dust hits her and she starts coughing her lungs out. Lyra steps further into the building and is hit by a gross smell. It's super dusty and smells like mold, plus the humidity is way too high for anyone to stay healthy. She realizes why everyone here is getting sick, and starts worrying about how the kids are even surviving with such bad hygiene and food. But when she actually sees the main room, she just stops in her tracks. She's completely floored by the sight of kids everywhere lying on the floor. It's a total disaster, and she knows things are way worse than she thought. She doesn't just stand around, though. She puts on a mask and starts wiping down one of the sick boys to get him clean, then moves straight to the kitchen. She knows he needs something warm to eat, so she gets to work cooking a meal. While she's working, she can't help but think about Hinata. She's basically praying for him to show up. She needs him to hurry and get there as fast as he can. But for now, she just finishes up what she can do, wiping the sweat off her forehead and taking a second to breathe. The little girl manages to eat some of the porridge Lyra made, but it's clear she's still a long way from actually getting better. She looks totally drained. Suddenly, someone yells Lyra's name from across the room, making her jump. It's Hinata. He bursts through the door with a huge pack, apologizing for taking so long. Lyra is shocked he finished the medicine so fast, but she panics when he almost says her fake name. Hinata ignores the slip-up, saying he rushed over so they could start treating the orphans right away. He gives the first girl a potion, she drinks it, and a warm glow starts. She starts looking healthy again. The girl thanks Lyra, calling her big sister, and Lyra just smiles, telling them all to get well soon while feeling super relieved. Things are looking up, and it seems like a full recovery for everyone is just a matter of time. Hinata carries a crate of medicine and says he's going to put the leftover potions in the orphanage storage. And as they walk, Lyra tells him he's actually pretty amazing for everything he's done. Hinata just smiles and says it's all thanks to her for taking care of the kids, making Lyra blush like crazy. She starts thinking about how he's the only person who actually gives her credit and notices her worth, since everyone else just expects her to handle things because she's the guild leader. She realizes she's starting to feel the same way about him too. Hinata scratches his head and mentions that working together like this makes him feel like they've basically become a married couple. Lyra completely loses it. She just stands there making weird noises, totally shocked by what he just said. Lyra lets out a confused sound. Hinata completely panics and asks if he actually said that out loud. He starts apologizing like crazy, saying he only brought it up because Zakog said something so weird. Lyra blushes and quietly mentions she wouldn't actually mind it, but Hinata is too busy tripping over his own words. He shuts the idea down fast, saying there's no way he and Lyra could ever actually be a married couple. Lyra just stands there looking completely stunned by how hard he's denying it. She starts feeling unsure and doesn't even know how to react anymore, wondering if he really has no feelings for her at all. Suddenly, a small groan comes from the bed. One of the sick kids mumbles in his sleep, calling out for his dad and mom. The timing is so awkward that both of them just freeze up, looking totally mortified, so Hinata stammers that he's going to go clean up and runs off, leaving Lyra standing there alone. Hinata and Lyra are both totally flustered after their weird moment, so Hinata just yells that he's counting on her, trying to brush off the awkwardness with a nervous laugh while he moves on as fast as he can. A whole week passes by after that day at the orphanage, and things seem to be going great. The kids are all running around and playing outside the church again, and Sister Maria is overjoyed, telling Lyra and Hinata that she has no idea how she can ever thank the Yggdrasil Guild for saving them. Lyra just waves it off with a smile and tells the nun not to worry about it, because staying close to the community and helping people out is exactly what a guild is supposed to do. The kids and Sister Maria wave goodbye with huge smiles as Hinata and Lyra finally head back. As they're walking down the street, Lyra looks over at Hinata and says there's something she's been pretty curious about. She asks him if that potion he used back then was really just a basic E rank. Lyra just stares at him in silence for a second, which makes Hinata start to sweat as he plays dumb and says he has no idea what she's talking about, but she doesn't buy it at all. She gives him a sharp look and says the effects of that potion were way too strong to be what he claimed. Hinata finally gives in and realizes he can't hide it, so he just sighs and says she figured it out, while he rubs the back of his neck and admits it was actually a much higher grade potion than he told her. He quickly waves his hands around to explain that since he did it on his own, he made sure to pay for the materials with his own cash, and tells her he still has some of that reward money left over from when he saved the Viscount. But Lyra stops and looks at him, asking if he's really sure about spending his own money like that, especially since he has his sister to think about. She starts bringing up how much he needs for food and basic living, but Hinata just cuts her off and tells her it's totally fine. She doesn't drop it though, and asks him what he's planning to do about his sister's illness if he's throwing his money away. So Hinata just looks off to the side with a sad expression and says that regular potions aren't going to cure her anyway. Lyra just stands there looking completely surprised by what Hinata just told her. She looks down and quietly tells him that he's way too kind for his own good. Hinata just rubs the back of his head and tells her that really isn't the case at all. Lyra can't help but blush and smile, thinking about how he's just such a nice guy. But as they walk down the street together, she wonders to herself how long it's going to take for him to finally notice how she feels. She keeps thinking about it and decides that maybe she should just give him a secret bonus for all his help. The two of them eventually make it back to the Merchant Guild Yggdrasil building and head straight into the warehouse, where Hinata gets ready to work while a staff member watches over the area. He puts his hands out and uses his material boost skill, making a magic circle glow right over the top of a barrel. He's right in the middle of working when someone calls his name, making him turn around to see who it is. Lyra catches Hinata in the middle of his work and asks him exactly what he was just doing. So Hinata points toward the bucket and explains he was just purifying the water using his material boost skill. Lyra looks completely shocked and asks if he's seriously able to do something as crazy as that, since holy water is pretty much just clean water when you get right down to it. Since high-quality potions need clean water or holy water to work, it's a huge deal, especially because normally people have to travel all the way to a church just to have someone pray over it. But Hinata tells her he can just make it himself with a skill, which is how he's able to craft everything so fast. Lyra stands there looking dazed and says that his skill basically makes the entire church useless. She wonders if he has any sense of respect for religion at all, and Hinata starts to sweat as he agrees, but he quickly panics and yells that what she's saying isn't true at all. Lyra just laughs it off with a wink, telling Hinata that she was only joking about the whole church thing, but Hinata is clearly flustered and asks her if she really has nothing better to do than mess with him. Lyra gets all defensive and starts yelling that he's the one who's always coming over to see her, while Hinata just stammers right as the other workers notice what's going on. One guy points out that the guild master is specifically here for Hinata, and the spiky-haired guy starts teasing him, saying he's probably just rushing through his work to see her. Hinata looks pretty surprised and asks if that's actually true, which sends Lyra into a total panic as she yells that it's not getting so embarrassed that she snaps and screams that she doesn't even care about Hinata anymore. She storms off in a huff while the guy with glasses just watches her go, leaving Hinata trying to call after her. The spiky-haired guy just shrugs it off and tells Hinata not to worry about it since that's just how she is, so Hinata stands there holding his bucket of water, realizing that despite all the chaos, he's actually enjoying his new job. Hinata looks down at his reflection in the water, thinking about how he used to handle all the holy water production at his old place too. He realizes that since he's not there anymore, the medical guild has to go to the church for it. He never actually told them he was making it, so he wonders if they'll manage. But then he remembers it's a professional medical guild he's talking about and figures they have to know the basics. Besides, he decides there's really no reason for him to be worrying about a guild that fired him anyway. He tells himself that he just needs to focus on the job right in front of him, so Hinata centers himself and gets to work, focusing his energy on the water in the bucket. A view of the storage shelves shows that everything is finally packed away and ready to go. Hinata wipes some sweat off his forehead, feeling pretty good about making a massive batch of potions again today. Just as Hinata is finishing up and wiping the sweat off his forehead, Lyra walks over and asks him if he has a moment. She mentions that there's actually something important she wants to talk about with him. Hinata stops what he's doing and asks her what's up. So Lyra gets straight to the point and asks if it's possible for them to start selling holy water at the Yggdrasil Guild. The idea catches Hinata completely off guard. He can't believe she's suggesting they sell holy water there. He starts thinking it over and says that while he definitely has the skills to make it, there's a catch. Hinata is worried that if they start selling it themselves, they'll basically be stealing the church's whole business. Lyra slumps her shoulders a bit, admitting that he makes a really good point and looking pretty disappointed until Hinata's eyes light up as a sudden realization hits him, and he tells her he's figured it out. He points out that the solution is actually simple. They just need to go and get permission from the church first. Hinata explains that if they just give the church a cut of the sales, there shouldn't be any issues. Lyra is totally on board and shouts that it's a killer idea, which makes Hinata decide to head over to negotiate immediately, while Lyra tells him she's counting on him. The scene shifts to the church, where the nun looks completely confused by the request. She double-checks to make sure she heard right about him wanting to handle the holy water. Hinata confirms that his guild really wants to take over the whole process, but he starts sweating internally, worried that they're just going to reject him on the spot. Surprisingly, the nun clasps her hands together and says that would actually be a massive help. She explains that making enough holy water for potions is a huge chore for them, especially since merchants come by and take massive amounts of the stuff every single day, leaving the sisters totally overwhelmed. Sister Maria explains that they were so short-handed they couldn't even spare staff for the orphanage, leaving all those kids in a bad spot. She looks pretty torn up about it, admitting she put them in danger the other day. Hinata asks if the church is the one running that orphanage, and she says yes, but then it clicks for her. She asks if he's the guy who saved the kids, and Hinata just gives a simple nod. He officially introduces himself as Hinata from the World Tree Yggdrasil Guild, making Maria realize the church is always getting saved by him. Hinata gets a little bashful and brushes it off, saying it's really nothing compared to how much she's helped him out. He actually stops by the church every morning before he starts his day. Turns out, he goes there to pray for his sister to get better from her illness, because doing that puts his mind at ease way more than just sitting around doing nothing. Hinata asks if it's cool with her if he sells the holy water back at the guild, and Sister Maria thinks that's a fantastic idea, saying it would really help them out too. She gets a bit ahead of herself and asks what percentage of the sales she needs to pay him, but the mention of money catches her off guard, leaving Hinata to explain that of course money is involved, since the church obviously needs some cash to keep running. He points out that seeing how beat up the orphanage looks, it's pretty clear they aren't getting enough donations lately. Maria just looks at him, totally touched by how much he cares about their situation, so she holds his hands and says she'll gladly take him up on that offer. It looks like the two of them are starting a partnership that's going to be a win for everyone involved. A few weeks go by, and everything is moving along until Lyra suddenly calls out for Hinata at the guild. She's looking hyped and tells him the holy water sales are actually doing way better than anyone expected. Hinata looks totally thrilled about how things are going. He tells Lyra he's really glad to hear that since the Yggdrasil World Tree holy water has basically been selling like wildfire. It turns out Hinata never even imagined the demand for this stuff would be so high, but the reason makes sense. While massive amounts of potions are traded in the commercial district every single day, the church is actually located a good distance away from the main shops, meaning most people would rather buy it nearby from the guild, even if it costs them a bit more. One customer holding a huge jar tells Hinata that being able to buy it there has been a massive help. He says getting their hands on holy water has become way easier. Just as Sister Maria shows up waving and calling out to Hinata, he looks over and sees her coming through the crowd. Hinata asks what's going on, and she tells him she just wanted to stop by and say thanks again. Sister Maria looks beyond happy as she tells Hinata that the orphanage renovation finally got the green light, and it's all thanks to him. Lyra says that's really wonderful news, and Maria adds that the money from those holy water sales made all the difference, so Hinata looks back at them with a smile. He's just genuinely happy he could step up and help out. Maria mentions that if the place had stayed falling apart like it was, the kids definitely would have ended up getting sick all over again. Lyra is basically cheering for him. She gives him a big smile and says he really pulled it off. Just then, Maria gets a bit territorial and tells Lyra that she and Hinata are actually talking right now, which leaves Lyra completely shocked. Lyra isn't having it and yells that she wants to talk to Hinata too. He just stands there laughing nervously while things stay crazy like this. It turns out Hinata has managed to come through one more time, and because of his help, the orphanage is officially saved. The scene shifts over to the medical guild where someone is getting ready for something big, starting with Gayak looking completely unhinged as he yells that this time, for sure, he's going to successfully make a potion. Kira shows up to announce that all the ingredients for the potion are finally ready, but he stops to ask the guild master what the plan is for the water supply. Gayak acts confused about why he's even asking, so Kira reminds him that water is a pretty big part of making potions. Gayak just loses it and tells him to prepare it however he wants, calling the guy incompetent while he's at it. Since this is a big medical guild, they obviously have their own well on site to use. Kira drags a heavy bucket back and yells that he's got the water, since they usually need it for surgeries anyway. Gayak takes a look inside and notices that the water actually looks pretty gross and dirty. Kira explains that it was super windy and rainy yesterday, so some trash probably just blew into the well and Gayak just nods along. Gayak shrugs and says it's not really a problem since nobody is planning on drinking the stuff. He's totally fine with it, because the potion is just meant to be poured directly onto open wounds to help with the magic. Gayak continues his reasoning, saying that the dirty water doesn't matter unless someone's drinking it, then tells Kira to get to work, insisting that no one will care for a potion that's only used on skin. Kira just shouts back a quick yes. A few hours later, the room is filled with rows of bottled potions, and Kira says they finally have enough to last. Gayak leans over him, patting his head and telling him how easy it was and that he did a great job. Kira looks super happy and thanks the guild master while the other doctors stand around watching. Gayak starts rubbing his chin, wondering out loud if Hinata was actually wasting time on such easy tasks every day. The other doctors chime in, saying it went so much faster doing it themselves and calling Hinata a total waste of money. Gayak gets a smug grin on his face and says he knew it all along, while Renat throws her hands up and yells that they never even needed a potion maker in the first place. Gayak starts laughing his head off, bragging about how he's been proven right yet again.